to the first episode of Getting Political. We're the other half. My name's Evan.
My name's Nick.
Together, we're a couple of Canadian leftists just trying to voice our opinion on the internet.
That no one asked for.
Yeah, especially. Our first episode today, we're going to be covering the political leaders of Canada. We're going to give a bit of opinion on how we feel about them. We're going to talk about facts, history related to the parties and where they stand.
General intro to Canadian politics, how the system works.
Yeah, in case you guys even if you're Canadian and you don't have knowledge of exactly how our parliament works, we're here to give that to you. From there, I think we're going to kind of try and segue into where we currently stand in polls, and we have actually demographic polling numbers to show, or not to show, but to talk about with you guys. And from there on out, it's kind of just be winging it, I guess. That's kind of just our schedule.
Yeah, we're gonna have fun.
Okay, if you want to get us started, Nick, we'll go into just the basic intro into Canadian politics.
Yeah, so our system is called first past the post, and what that means is we have a bunch of mini ridings throughout the country, or mini elections, and each party tries to win the most number of mini elections to gain seats in the parliament, and everyone wants that special 170 seat because that's a majority in our government, so they could pass legislation. And if they don't get that, then they have to have a minority and have to work with other parties to pass legislation, which is just harder because you have to compromise. And this system is kind of weird, though. You can sometimes end up with not winning the popular vote, but winning a majority. So the system is not great in finding out who the Canadians most support.
Yeah,
and then no parties actually received a majority of 50% since 1984, Evan.
Well, and just to give quick background too, if there's anyone from the States listening, or anyone who has knowledge of States politics but doesn't have knowledge of Canadian ones, it relates in a lot of ways, but it's also different in a lot of ways. You know how in the States, for anyone who knows, that again, the popular vote does not mean you win necessarily, right? And it's kind of the same here, where a popular vote does not guarantee that you're winning by any means. So it's arguably, you can definitely argue it's not a great way to represent the voice of the people, but that's how it is.
It's different too, because we don't really have a president. The prime minister has to run in the same kind of mini election as everyone else and has to be elected on their own terms, which can lead to weird things like sometimes leaders don't actually win their seat for the party that wins a majority. So then they're kind of left hanging and actually have to kind of leave if they don't do that.
And so just to if you want to go into a little bit, Nick, how a rundown of just how the governmental system works. It goes prime minister into what is it, House of Commons and then Senate.
Oh yeah, so you mean just how bills are passed?
Yeah, just essentially a prime minister, once they're elected, and if they're elected in a majority, they're the ones who essentially make and dictate the bills to their party, and then it gets passed through House of Commons and Senate, and then so on and so forth, right?
Exactly. Well, first thing that all parties have to do is they have to deliver a throne speech, and then the throne speech has to be voted on, and it has to get a majority, otherwise the government doesn't have the confidence of the House, is the correct term. And so for majority government, they just get the confidence of the House because everyone votes for it and they have a majority. But then passing bills, it's first introduced by a member of the government, so one of the ministers, Ministry of Fishery, let's say, introduced a bill to ban fishing. That bill would be read in the House of Commons one time, and then it would be voted on. It would be read a second time, voted on, and then it either gets approval or not. Then it's sent to a committee. The committee hears from people who will be affected by the bill, and maybe edits things and changes the wording a bit. It's read in the House of Commons a third time, and then it goes into the Senate, which the Senate is a body of the government that is not elected. It's appointed by the Prime Minister. So it's supposed to be the sober second thought, is what people call it.
And they can't be removed, correct? Right? Once they're appointed, they have to withdraw.
I'll be honest, Evan, I don't know.
I'm pretty sure
they have
that's
to
correct.
remain in good behavior.
Well, yeah, like I mean that's what I
Mm,
mean. But like if a Senate member were to have a scandal, most of the time they're going to retire, right?
right. Usually, yeah, they just resign.
But I'm pretty sure that I mean I'll double check while you're continuing to talk. But I'm pretty sure they are appointed and they can't be
Mhm.
removed.
I do know that Justin Trudeau did institute a new policy where there's a forced retirement age, so that instead of just staying in there, oh, I think you might be right, because then you just stay in there for life almost until you retired. So now there's a forced retirement age where they have to leave, so new people can be brought in, so it doesn't become like an old guard. Um, but
Yeah,
it's interesting
so
because only.
I have it here real quick. The Canadian Senate is nearly a lifetime appointment and a very difficult post to use. Under Canadian law, senators are allowed to keep their positions until the age of 75, and it is almost impossible to remove them even if they're dogged by controversy. So yeah, they're essentially in there until they choose to leave of their own will or they hit the age 75.
Yeah. Um, and it's pretty wild how like essentially the prime minister just chooses who gets in there. So only conservative and liberals technically are in there. Now, Justin has like tried to appoint independents, but then you have to consider that it's only independents that he would like agree with, on at least a basic level.
And to give history to that, the reason it's mostly liberals and cons is because, like in the states, we're pretty much a two-party system as well. So while the states has Republicans, Democrats, we have liberals and conservatives, and they're like the ruling party. So they win majority of federal elections.
Exactly. And if you get a majority, then you get to choose who goes into the Senate, which is interesting because then if a party wins that isn't those two parties, they'd have to then work with like an unelected body and make sure that they would pass their legislation. Granted, they've never held up anything major yet, but they could. um, but then once it reaches the Senate, the bill, the banned fishing bill, it then has to be read in the Senate one time, read in the Senate a second time, voted on. Then it has to go to a Senate committee. Then they edit it. They usually don't edit it because they're Senate, they're not supposed to, but they like consider it, and then it goes. Then it passes through committee to third reading. If it passes that vote, it then has to receive royal assent, and this is where our monarchy comes in, our constitutional monarchy. It's sort of just a procedural thing where the governor general will like sign for it and say, yeah, the queen approves this or the monarchy approves this. Canada is allowed to make this into a law. The queen has never refused to do anything, has never intervened. But it's sort of symbolic at this point.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting view to know like well that's where we differ greatly obviously from the United States as they declared independence, you know, had their whole war with that. We did not. We're still technically under a monarchy, even though we've never been affected by it any time recently where they've really changed any laws like you know had that veto vote.
Mhm.
We just kind of hold it as a it's like a status symbol more than anything else. It's not really a
Yeah.
political symbol.
Until Pierre Elliott Trudeau, we actually, our constitution, to be approved for changes, it had to be approved by the British government. That isn't the case anymore. We can change our constitution on our own, but until like the 1980s, we still had to rely on them to help change our constitution, which is kind of wild.
And then below the Senate, I mean, you can argue like power wise they're definitely below, but like you know people wise they're the same as anyone else. There's party members, right, and those are people who um, opt to pay a fee to carry a card that says they're dedicated and part of a membership to a specific political party. So in this case, we'll use liberals as an example. If I were
Hmm.
to um, pledge $15 a year and carry a card and have the qualifications. I can't say what exactly the qualifications are. I know you do need basic ones to be able to join. You essentially, as a party member, are the people who um, get to talk amongst your party. Like you don't have any official power, like as an MP or an MPP would, but you get to talk within your party and you get to suggest amendments to your party's platforms. You get
Hmm.
to suggest
Support them
amendments.
for policies.
Yeah, exactly. And you get to help elect the local candidates that like represent your local ridings, or you get to help elect the actual leader of that party itself.
Yeah,
Um,
when a leadership election comes around, you can vote in that.
exactly. Though it's on a lower level scale power-wise, it's very important to party-specific
Hmm.
cases. Um, Now, if you want to just quickly list off our main parties, I guess.
Okay. So we have about six main parties in Canada. And main is a loose word there because one of them doesn't have any seats at the moment. But we have first the Liberals, who are the current government. They're our center-left leaning party, led by Justin Trudeau. We have the Conservatives, who are the center-right party. And with Aaron O'Toole, some could argue that he's brought it more into straight up the center. Uh, and then leaning further left, we have Jagmeet Singh, who's the left wing of our country, represents the New Democratic Party. Then we have the Bloc Québécois, which is left-leaning, but it has an extra axis because it's Quebec sovereigntist, meaning that it just advocates for Quebec sovereignty, Quebec nationalism, all things Quebec. Then we have the Green Party, which is used to be one issue party, but it's trying to expand more, led by Enemy Paul. And Blanchet runs the Bloc Québécois, I forgot that. Enemy Paul runs the Green Party. They're very heavily focused on climate change and green policy. And then we have the People's Party of Canada, which is a far-right party led by Maxime Bernier. It's very libertarian, very individual freedom-based, anti-vax in some cases, one might say.
Yeah.
And the Liberals and the Cons are the two leading parties, with the NDP making up most of the other part of the parliament, and the Bloc Québécois, and the Green Party has 2 seats usually.
And how many seats? Do you want to just clarify for everyone how many seats are in our parliament?
Oh, yeah. We have 338 seats spread out across Canada. Most of them are situated in Ontario and Quebec.
Our two largest provinces, for those who don't
yeah.
know.
And most populated.
Yeah.
And then and then 3 territories are up north, which have 3 seats each to their own.
Yeah, just to give a quick, in case there happens to be anyone who doesn't know anything about Canadian geography listening to this, you know, the United States are split into different states, obviously. We're split into things called provinces and territories. We have, 10 provinces, 3 territories?
Yep.
And so, like a state, they work the exact same way. They have their own, like, provincial ruling, and they have their own territorial provincial rights and stuff like that, and they're ruled by specific members of parliament. And so each one gets a certain amount of seats based on its total population. So Ontario and Quebec are our 2 most populated and largest provinces. So they carry more seats than the rest of the provinces.
Exactly. And Prince Edward Island, just funny side note, is guaranteed 4 seats, no matter its population. So that's an interesting little thing.
Yeah, and Prince Edward Island is on the east coast. It's the smallest province we have. It's essentially an island. It's like a tiny island.
Yeah.
So if we want to give since we covered generally the parties, if we want to go into the party leaders now, we can start with Trudeau and the Liberals.
Yeah. So Justin Trudeau, just a basic rundown on who he is. He's the first prime minister to be the son of a former prime minister, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who was a massively popular figure. You loved him or you'd love him or hate him, as Evan would say.
Yeah.
And he worked as a substitute teacher in Vancouver for a bit, and then Justin Trudeau kind of emerged onto the public scene right around the time his father died, because this eulogy he gave, which was actually very moving to the country, that CBC actually received a lot of calls to like replay it just so people they couldn't get enough of this. And he started entering politics officially in 2008 when he ran in Papagnon, which is the riding he still represents to this day. Then he ran for leader in 2013, winning the party vote with 80.1% of the leader support. So he was massively supported inside the Liberal Party. Then in 2015, in his first election, he campaigned and he brought his party from a conservative majority to a liberal majority in one election. So he really rallied the country around him in that election. And since then, he's governed Canada, first a majority government and then a minority government. And in this election, he's kind of hoping to get a majority again. That's why he's called it. And that's kind of where he came from and what he's doing now.
Yeah, great. And since we're covering Trudeau, and obviously he's the face of the Liberal Party, I can go into a bit about just who the Liberals are in general.
Yeah, please.
So the Liberal Party of Canada is the oldest political party And historically, it has been the most successful party, winning more elections than any other party that exists. Um, they, as Nick said earlier, they call themselves a center-left party. So obviously, if you know the political scale, there's the left and the right, and they hold center, and then a bit to the left is what they would define themselves as. Um, they've been, as I said, they've been pretty big all throughout the 19th and early 20th century. They essentially adopted the original British Liberal Parliament and values when they established themselves in Canada. They had pretty much the exact same way of doing things and running things originally. So obviously, for a lot of people at the time, that felt really nice because if you're moving from one place to another, it still feels like home in a sense.
Still stability.
Exactly, exactly. They used to hold a almost centrist take, maybe even you could argue center right a little bit, pretty much from the mid 1800s to the early 1900s. And then when World War II happened, they adopted a completely different political stance, and now that's where they define themselves now as a center-left party. And a lot of that is due to, as Nick said, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, where you loved him or hate him, because arguably he did a lot of amazing things for the country. He unified us in a lot of ways, unified us on the left a lot of ways. But there are still people who argue that he didn't do enough or he did this thing wrong, and so on and so forth. You could go on for days about it. Today, however, the Liberal Party is moving in a semi-centrist direction, I could argue.
Mm-hmm.
They portray themselves as like a social progressive party, so they try to be socially progressive as they can, is what they say, and more often than not, they're more of like a fiscal responsibility party, which means they hold that center leaning. They're strong for unrestricted abortion rights. They're in support of LGBTQ. They support immigration, and they also favor the free market economy, which is essentially in some ways what we hold now, depending on how you look at it. They don't like. It's weird to say because they're a big government leader and they have been for long periods of time. But they necessarily don't define themselves as being a big government. They take the approach of like, we're just one of you, essentially. And for that, they get a lot of backlash from the right because obviously in politics, the right usually disagrees with the left. But especially when it comes to the liberals, they get a lot of hate from especially farther right people who, I guess, say that they're just wearing a mask and it's all a masquerade. They're not actually. They're in the end, they're just a big government like anything else. They're not actually trying to work for the people.
There's definitely some sentiment that some people think it's like they're authoritarian somehow.
Yeah, exactly. There's like, you'll always have the fucking far right out of nowhere, So, right now they've been our minority government for how long? It's been six years.
They won a minority government in 2019 October.
Right. So almost 3 years, or 2.5 years, I guess.
Yes.
And prior to that, though, they won majority in 2015, correct?
Yes, they did. And what did they do during that? They banned a lot of firearms.
Oh yeah, so, and also just to say, like, again, to add on to what they're in support of, they do believe in climate change and they believe in climate solutions and stuff like that. They've never taken the stance against climate change, which is obviously a good thing. They've done a decent amount of work between their majority win in 2015 till now. They're very anti-gun, so they actually, I think it was last year or 2 years ago now, they put out the bill that banned any high-velocity assault rifles from being owned, and or high-velocity guns of any kind, not specifically assault rifles, but high-velocity guns from being owned. They've supported movements like, I guess most governments did, unless you were the Republicans, but they supported most movements like Black Lives Matter. They supported any socially progressive movements in that sense. They still hold to their centrist ideal for sure when it comes to never going the extra step, is how I would put it personally.
they say they're there for you, but it's not always there for you when you need it,
Exactly.
kind of thing.
Um, yeah, all in all, they're definitely a preferred. I'll get my opinion here just real quick. They're definitely preferred by me to the conservatives, but in a lot of ways, since they hold that center left, quote unquote, they resemble the conservatives in a large number of ways as well. Um, just they're a bit more progressive
Hmm.
when it comes to certain things for sure.
Hovering around that center mark, there's a lot of things that they can't get done that I definitely love to see just happen in our country.
Exactly. If you want to go into the cons here, Nick,
Yeah,
talk about
so
O'Toole a bit here.
Aaron O'Toole. No one used the tool insult throughout the entire campaign. Uh, so he was born in Quebec. He joined the military after he was finished high school, and he worked there for actually 12 years. He didn't really serve outside of Canada, but he did do search and rescue operations in Nova Scotia and North Ontario, I think. So he's been out onto the ocean, like doing search and rescue on the Nova Scotian Ocean, the Atlantic. Um, and then when he was finished in after the military, he became a lawyer for a little bit, but then almost just jumped straight into politics. He ran in Durham in a by-election and he won it. And then under Stephen Harper's government, he became the Minister for Veteran Affairs.
And
Um,
for those who don't know,
then
for any reason, Stephen Harper was the conservative leader from I think 2003 to 2015.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And he ruled a lot of minority governments until 2011, where he won a majority.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, and so once and then in in 2016, in 20 no, in 2015, Stephen Harper no wait oh my god
You're okay.
in 2017, sorry, Aaron O'Toole ran for leadership of the Conservative Party. He lost it actually to Andrew Scheer and Maxime Bernier. So he came third. Um, Andrew Scheer did not go on to win the 2019 election, so he stepped down. And then Aaron O'Toole stepped up again and ran again for leadership. And this was during the COVID pandemic, so only four candidates ran actually, and he won in the final round. And surprisingly, most of his votes came from social conservatives because the way it works is it's instant runoffs. So first, two social conservative candidates both got kicked out of the running after they lost this first, fourth, and third round, and then all those votes kind of came into O'Toole. So the social conservative vote propelled him to a win. Um, and so he's been the leader of the Conservative Party since then, since 2019, and he's hoping to maybe win a minority conservative government or a majority conservative government, and just kind of increase their winnings. It's kind of hard to say what he'll do if he doesn't win. Recently, Conservative Party has a history of leaders stepping down if they don't win, so we'll see what happens there.
Um, yeah, and now that we're on the cons, I'll give you guys a bit of history about that. So, technically, I mean, not even technically, factually, the current Conservative Party is the newest party in Canada by like definition, by definition of big parties at least, the newest party. Um, so they were formed in 2003 when the Progressive Conservative Party merged with the Canadian Reform Conservative Alliance Party. So Progressive Conservative Party was a Progressive Conservative Party, and then the Canadian Reform Conservative Alliance Party was arguably a right wing political party that essentially its entire goal, it was a one topic issue party that its entire goal was to reform Canada to match its ideals. That's essentially all it wanted.
Yeah.
And so they merged in 2003 to create what is now the Conservative Party of Canada, the CPC. Um, and initially, they've always like it's interesting. They've always identified themselves since 2003 as a progressivist party. Progressivist, obviously, in the conservative take. So
Progressive conservative.
exactly. So they've always argued they're not a traditional conservative party in the sense that currently, at least, O'Toole supports LGBTQ. He supports abortion. He believes in climate change. He believes that the vaccine is real and that we should get vaccinated. Like he doesn't. He didn't
Crazy.
hold like the Trumpian thoughts. I guess is what I could argue on that of conservatism. Um, so since they've been reformed. So initially I think it was Stephen Harper who took over in 2003, wasn't it? Or was it 2005?
Stephen Harper, I think he was the leader of the party since its inception.
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, so okay, no, I got it. So he was the leader of the Canadian Alliance Party, and then when they formed the Conservative Party, he just took leadership of the CPC. Um, and then in 2006, after 3 years after the CPC was formed, Stephen Harper won the election and was elected the first Conservative Party's Prime Minister of Canada. And he held that riding, as I said, up until 2015 when he lost to Justin Trudeau, winning, I think, he won a few minorities and a couple majorities, didn't he, between those times?
He won mostly minorities until 2011 when the NDP surged, and they also won a majority at the same time.
Okay, yeah, great. So it's interesting. The definition, when you ask a party to define themselves, usually they'll give you a clear-cut answer. Like, I could pretty much explain what I was saying earlier, what the Liberals are. For example, when it comes to the CPC, they're a little interesting because, as I said, O'Toole supports LGBT and abortion and all those things, but there's a lot of people within the Conservative Party who do not support that and are very vocal about not supporting that. So they have a hard way to define themselves completely as a party, because you have someone at the top and a few people at the top who are saying we like this, and then a lot of people that are in the mid to the below saying we don't like this. So they don't have you really can't truly define them because they have so much infighting when it comes to certain issues like that.
They're a much more scattered party. Like, they're a much more big tent party than the
exactly.
Liberals are.
It's like a big umbrella term essentially for the right. But you can define them as a conservative, and they definitely, economically, they definitely do hold conservative values. They want to lower taxes for businesses, large or small. They take the more like libertarian stance a little bit when they want less intrusive government. So they want the people to hold their own rights as much as they can. And they absolutely believe in the law. So they support policing. They support policing initiatives. They support essentially just law and order, to break it down. They're very in support of it. They also support very strongly the Canadian military and wanting to expand and grow to become, our own operating force, essentially.
A little bit of a world power.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's like a decent history of them. It's really hard to define who they are now because, as I said, there's so much infighting. There's so much change in thought between the top to the bottom in the Conservative Party that it's interesting to really look into it.
I agree.
If we want to,
I think.
Oh yeah, no, you can go. Sorry.
I think one of our next episodes should actually be history of the two conservative parties, because they split in the late 1990s, and that would be a really interesting topic.
Yeah, for sure.
Tune in for that.
We can definitely we'll get the viewer replies and see if they would like that. Now
Let
if
us
you
know
want
what
to
you
cover Jagmeet and go into the NDP.
Yeah, totally. So Jagmeet Singh was born in Scarborough, Toronto, Ontario.
And he is Sikh, just for anyone who doesn't know.
Yes. Practicing Sikh. Interesting thing about that, it means you always have to have a dagger on you, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, his dagger looks pretty sick.
It does. It's always got that thing on.
Yeah, he's always carrying.
So he was a criminal defense lawyer for a lot of his early career, till 2011, when he decided to run in the Ontario Parliament for the NDP. He actually became the first turban-wearing MPP, so Member of Provincial Parliament for Ontario, and he ran again in 2014, won again. And when he was in there, he became the deputy leader for the provincial NDP party. And there was some talk that he might run for leadership of the NDP provincially, but he decided to run for the federal one. He won. So, as I was talking about the conservative one, how O'Toole won in the last, after 4 rounds of voting. Jagmeet won in the very first round. He just won flat out with 53% of the vote. So immediately a majority of federal NDP supported him. Since he's been leader, he's only seen one election in 2019, And in that election, his party didn't do too well. It won 24 seats, which was down from 44 seats under Thomas Monclair, um, who also lost seats after Jack Layton. So this election is looking a little better for the NDP poll wise. And Jagmeet's been surging with the youth.
Yeah, he's
Um,
absolutely a. I think he's targeting the right demographics for his party.
yes.
He's involved in like Twitch streaming, and he's involved in getting young people out to the polls, and he's involved in, he makes memes, and like some of them aren't funny, but it's just the fact that I think he's doing it to try and engage that young audience, and I think that's really great. I think it's important. Uh,
You can argue that the very fact that he's trying to engage that audience shows that he cares more about it than those who don't try.
exactly, and I think it is an absolute importance to engage a younger audience because I think our voices deserve to be as heard just as much as anyone else's, right? So.
Yeah. Um, so that's kind of what I have on Jagmeet.
Okay, I'll go into just a quick brief of the NDP. So, for those of you who don't know, Jagmeet and the NDP, they're a social democratic party. They're not liberal, they're not conservative, they're a social democrat, which means they lean farther left. They're in like the mid-left range of if you looked at a political scale, for example.
Yeah.
Um, so they were founded originally in the Great Depression, which was in 1920s, late 1920s, early 1930s. And they were first known essentially as the CCF, which was the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, and it was a complete socialist party, not social democratic. It advocated solely for socialism and socialistic ideals.
Far left.
They wanted to overthrow the current capitalist system, which we obviously still live in today. But back then, they absolutely wanted to overthrow it. It was their main goal as a party, and they wanted to ensure that all people had the same rights as anyone else. It was an all-encompassing, all-including social party. Since then, they've become more moderate, which is now why they're a social democrat party. They're not full socialist anymore by any means, and they've been compared in a lot of ways in certain fundamentals to the Liberal Party. They've been compared a lot of ways in certain fundamentals to the Green Party. So they kind of hold that middle ground. Um, they advocate currently for a mixed economy, which is where the government has the ability to regulate certain things in the economy, but by no means has full say and full run over the economy. So not a capitalist system in full effect, but just a more dumbed down version, essentially, is what they advocate for. We've never actually had an NDP prime minister in Canada. Consistently through most of history, whether they were the CCF or the NDP, they've usually placed third to fourth, which isn't terrible. It's not great, obviously. The only time it's ever actually come in second, and Nick mentioned this name earlier, is within Jack Layton in 2011, when they briefly and surprisingly, it was a huge surprise for a lot of the population at the time of Canada, they surpassed the Liberals to become the official opposition, as obviously the Conservatives at the time won a minority government.
They won a
majority, sorry, and they became the official opposition as the NDP, which was unheard of at the time, completely unheard of. It's one of the first times in Canadian elections where essentially a not of the big two parties actually made a statement and became an opposition. Sadly, Jack Layton passed away the same year, which is obviously very unfortunate.
I think it was the almost following month.
Yeah, which is very unfortunate. He was an amazing guy. I'm gonna give a little bit of my take on it. He was an amazing guy. He had amazing values, huge heart. Very sad that he passed away, especially after winning such a big deal for his party. Which then Nick mentioned the other name, Thomas Monclair. That's who replaced Jack Layton as the leader of the NDP. A lot of people did not like Thomas Monclair as much as they liked Jack Layton, which, as Nick said, caused them to lose a lot of seats. Thomas Monclair resigned. Jagmeet was put in, or elected, I should say. Which, again, they lost a few more seats, which usually happens when you have a leader change during an election times. And now as Nick said, they're polling decently well. Like they're up. They're up of what they would have been in 2019, or what they were in 2019 election.
If the projections are right, they're set to gain seats.
And I know you said that Jagmeet is the first turban-wearing MPP, but he's also the first non-white and non-Christian person to lead a Canadian political party ever in Canada's history. So
That is
it's a huge step.
crazy.
It's a huge step for inclusion. It was a huge step for, pushing away that societal norm of you have to be a white old guy to run a party. And I think it's huge. It was a huge win,
I
definitely.
agree. I agree completely, and hopefully this next election can show, showing a bit of my bias here, but can show that the parties can succeed. They just have to keep trying.
Exactly. Um, okay, yeah, I think that's good for the NDP. If you want to move into the bloc now,
Oh boy, fun.
our favorite party. Yeah, we'll try to be unbiased when we're describing the history and stuff, obviously, but we're definitely biased when it comes to how we
Mhm.
feel about the bloc.
So Yvan Francis Blanchet is the leader of the Bloc Québécois at the moment. He was born in Quebec.
Oh, to interject,
Um,
sorry, just really quick, for anyone who may be listening and doesn't know, Quebec is instead of their first language being English, their first language is French. It's the only province in Canada that holds their first language as French. So they're a very large populated French-speaking province.
yes, they are our second most populated province and majority French there.
Exactly.
In fact, almost all of our political leaders also always speak French and English.
Yeah, well, it's mandated for sure.
Yeah. Um, so he was born in Quebec. He has a degree in history and anthropology, and before he got into politics, he actually worked as a leader, and he started a music business. Um, then in 2008, sorry, in 2008 he ran in the provincial election, and he was reelected in 2012. He actually lost his seat in the provincial election in 2014, when I believe a Liberal majority came in. Uh, so after he lost that seat, he kind of laid low for like about 4 years till 2018 when he ran for the leader of the Bloc Québécois. And the Bloc Québécois at that time, you're going to talk about the history of it, so I'll let you do that.
Okay.
But he ran in the leadership race, and no one ran against him, so he just became leader. Um, and so he from that he led the bloc from 10 seats to 32 seats, so massive increase in support for the bloc, specifically because they're only in Quebec. That may not be a good standing for like other parties, but for the bloc, it's great. Um, and they became the third party in Canada, like in size wise. And this one, he kind of hopes to just keep his winnings, maybe earn more of the Quebec seats. He can't become prime minister because the party only runs seats inside Quebec, and so we'll never win a plurality unless something really weird happens. So he's only there to make sure that Quebec is supported.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. So as you said, I'll go into a little bit of the history here. The Bloc Québécois and Quebec as general is probably one of the largest and most ongoing contemporary issues we have in Canada. Um, the fact that for a long time there's been referendums on this. I think back in the 90s, or
Yeah,
it was late 80s, early 90s. Quebec has wanted to split from Canada completely, be its own nation, be its own sovereign nation. There's always been a
separate
huge
country.
divide. It's been, again, as I said, one of the largest contemporary issues that faces just general Canadians, and especially people in Quebec, for a long time now. So the Bloc was actually founded in 1990. So again, it's a fairly young party in comparison to these other ones. Um, it was founded by a guy named Lucien Bouchard. He
Mhm.
was previously, before he founded the Bloc, he was a part of the Progressive Conservatives as a cabinet minister, and the Bloc was the first party to be the first party ever to be openly supportive of separatism of Quebec. It was the first party to ever come out and say, "We want this, we like it, we need it." Um,
Yeah,
the Bloc, as Nick was saying, it only runs candidates in Quebec. You can only vote for the Bloc if you're in Quebec. That's how it's been since its creation. So, as he said, winning those 32 seats in just Quebec alone is massive. It's huge. It's a huge win. Um, so, but by this reasoning, at the same time, it's also impossible maybe is a strong term, but I'll use it. It's almost impossible for it to ever be a governing body of Canada, because if say somehow every person in Quebec votes for the Bloc Québécois and they win in Quebec like in a landslide, it would most likely put them at either a minority, most likely a minority, or the official opposition to whoever has the government at the time. And it genuinely makes no sense, obviously, because no other Canadian got to vote for that, but yet they're representing them in Parliament, so it makes no sense on that front. So again, their main goal has been to separate. It's to be their own nation. It's to be Quebec as its own nation to nation
Yeah.
relations with Canada, but Quebec is on its own.
Yeah.
Ideology, Jesus Christ, ideologically, they are quite left wing, which is it's good. It's great to see. They are a very left wing party. They're I'd say what more or less left wing as the NDP would be.
Yeah, I would say virtually the same. Maybe they're fall between the NDP and the Liberals, but they vote for the NDP a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Which is unsurprising because I don't know. Maybe there's some Canadians who are listening to this who don't know this, but Quebec is generally considered to be one of the most left wing provinces in Canada. There's so many young voters, and there's so much young voter turnout in Quebec that usually the leftist ideals come out more than not.
Polls have consistently shown that climate change is one of their most cared about issues there too.
Exactly. Yeah. So as you said, yeah, they had very yeah. I mean, the article I'm reading this from says very poor, but I mean, very poor is a bit of an understatement for the Bloc Québécois elections when it came to Blanchet winning them, because as you said, no one turned up, and he just won by default. And it's actually interesting to give another just a quick fact on Blanchet. He actually used to run. I don't know. Maybe did you mention this? That you mentioned that he was in Parliament.
Oh, I didn't. I forgot.
Yeah, he used to sit as the minister to the separatist administration that governed Quebec. So Blanchet has always had these ideals in mind. It's not something new. It's not like he just adopted them when he got into the party. He's always wanted Quebec to be a separate sovereign state.
Exactly. At least he's consistent.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you can argue that for sure. Do we want to move into green now? I feel like we covered the block pretty well.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one thing about the Quebec referendums for leaving Canada.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I just looked it up, and so there's been two referendums, but the one in 1985, there was one in 1980 and 85. The one in 85 had the highest turnout for any vote ever in Quebec. 93.52% of people showed up, and the no vote won, like the not to leave, won by 50.58%. Less than a percent.
Yeah, I rounded up, I guess. Yeah, I thought it won by 1%. Yeah.
So they were very split.
Yeah, to say again, as I was saying at the start, to say it's one of the most pressing contemporary issues that Canadians face is not an understatement. And just think that referendum was before the Bloc Québécois even existed. So that was prior to them having actual governmental support. But now that they have governmental support and they're polling decently well in Quebec currently, it's always an issue that the average Canadian has to think about. I think it's very important to know.
Yeah, we need Quebec as much as they need us.
Exactly. And I think hopefully the elections coming will demonstrate that they want to stay just as much as we want them to stay.
Yeah. And enemy poll?
Yeah, we'll go into the Greens now for sure.
Okay, so Enemy Paul is the new leader of the Green Party. She was born in Toronto, Ontario. She actually became involved in politics at a relatively young age. At the age of 12, she was a page in the Ontario legislature, and then later she became one in the Canadian Senate. So she's been around politics for a while, and she also is bilingual. Her mother made sure that she knew both French and English at an early age, so she's quite fluent. She became a lawyer, and she was called to the bar in Ontario in 1998. Then she lived in Barcelona for a time, and then she moved back in 2019, ran for the Green Party in Toronto Centre, lost, and then decided to run for the Green Party leader immediately after Elizabeth May stepped down, which was late 2019, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. Elizabeth May, she announced she was stepping down, and Enemy Paul ran for it. She did not win in the first round. She won in the final round with a 54% vote. So, party wasn't fully in support of either. Well, they were fully in support of her because she won a majority, but still kind of split. she got the chance to run again as the leader in a by-election in Toronto Centre, and she came second, behind the Liberal Party. Now, that was during the COVID-19 pandemic, and turnout was extremely low. So we'll see how she falls in this new election. Since she's been leader, her party has kind of had a few problems. One of their three members switched to the Liberals, so they only had two members in Parliament. A leadership review happened after that, and they tried to oust her. The vote failed, so she remained. But then they tried to have another vote, but then they called it off because the election got called. And there's been some financial rumors that the party is kind of bankrupt itself because lawyers are infighting with each other, like they're suing each other internally. So her main goal this campaign, I think, is to just hold the campaign together and not lose as badly as possible.
And
So she's got to work cut out for it. She's trying to win in Toronto Centre, but it's all an uphill battle. So we'll see how she does.
yeah, and just to mention too, I don't think I heard you say it. She is a black woman.
Oh, I didn't. Go
I
ahead.
believe her parents are from, I think it's Dominican and somewhere else. I don't remember exactly where. I'm pretty sure they're both immigrants though. And
Yes, they are.
she is also Jewish as well.
Yeah, she's the first. She's the second visible minority to lead a party
And
after
I
Doug.
think one of the first Jewish, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. First black person.
Yeah, which is obviously amazing. Like, though I may not agree with everything she's done, I think it's great that we're seeing minorities take rise in power positions, right?
Yes, we need more representation in government.
Okay, and then to give you a quick history, the Green Party was founded in 1983, so it is also relatively new in comparison to something like the Liberals, obviously. Um, it for a long time, as Nick was saying, they've always pretty much had an uphill battle, being the Green Party. They didn't even win any margin of significant number of votes up until the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And it didn't even elect its first member of parliament, which I think we will talk about Elizabeth May. I think she's absolutely worth talking about. Until 2011, who was Elizabeth May.
Yes.
They started from their inception to around the early 2000s. They were a one-issue party. They were completely focused on the environment, thus the name Green Party. They are focused on green energy initiatives. They were focused on climate change initiatives. They were focused on anything that related to the environment becoming more sustainable and more green. That was their one-party issue.
Yeah, exactly. They were really a voice for that one. No one else is really talking about it yet.
Exactly, and then until the early 2000s, which is when they decided to become a broader market, fucking governing issue or governing what the fuck party? I couldn't think of the word. A
wider
broader
policy
governing
platform.
party, which is when Elizabeth May came in and she said, fuck this. Like, we're not going to win anything being a single issue party. Let's appeal to the leftists. So they
Yeah.
essentially define themselves as not far left, but a moderately left party. With still main focuses on stuff like climate change and green issues, green initiatives. But now they've appealed their platform and their party to focus on all issues in Canada. So now they're no longer a one-issue party. They focus on everything, just as any other political party would.
And I do believe doing so, they had to kind of moderate their party, because when you're in a one-issue party, you can kind of attract a few people who just believe that one issue, but are also kind of a bit kooky.
Yeah.
Other than that, so they were able to moderate themselves a lot, just to have a consistent candidate squad.
So once they made that change in the early 2000s, they actually started to make, for what their party at the time had never seen in gains. From going to winning less than 1% of votes, they were winning now 3 to 6%, which is absolutely phenomenal. It's insane. It's a huge jump. They were more out there. They were more vocal. They didn't win any seats until 2011, but during that time they raised awareness for their own party, and obviously that is the most important thing at the end of the day. And to go into a little bit about Elizabeth May, because her importance.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, what?
She won the seat in 2011.
That's
when she won it. Oh, sorry. I thought you said they didn't.
No, I said they did win in 2011.
Oh, sorry. I might have misheard.
You're such an idiot.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. To go a bit into Elizabeth May, because I think not only for the Green Party, but I think just her impact on politics is considerable, especially in Canada. So she was a politician who, once joining the Green Party in the early 2000s, she ran for, I think, 3 different seats. I don't know if I'm wrong on that. Pretty sure she ran 3 different seats in 3 different provinces because she was trying so hard for the Green government to get 1 seat in the parliament. Um, until she
No, you're right.
eventually,
You're right.
I am okay, perfect. Until eventually she won in 2011, which she won the BC district of Saanich Gulf Islands in 2011, being the first ever Green elected member to Parliament, which is obviously an absolute amazing phenomenon of its own, right? Just being one of the parties that got less than 1% of the votes within 10 years to being a member of Parliament, absolutely insane.
Yeah.
So she stayed as leader for, I think, do you know? I think it's like 12, 15, 13 years, somewhere around there.
From 2006 to 2019.
That's 13 years. Yeah, 13 years as leader. She resigned in 2019. That was a big. That's where I think Nick kind of covered it a bit, where the infighting and all that started. That was a big blow to the Greens, to say the very least. When she resigned,
Yeah.
she was essentially, arguably, she was the glue that was holding the Green Party together. And when she offered a resignation, which I think was completely credited, she's like 70 years old, I think, right?
She's 67.
Yeah, which I think was completely, for being in politics for the last fucking, 45 years. I think it was very important. But I think just the influence that, I'm gonna go into a bit of a tangent here. I just think it shows how you can start from nothing and make something if you put the effort in. I'm not saying that in like the capitalist ideal where it's like work for what you want, but I mean, she wanted a seat in Parliament, and it took her 10 years, but she fucking did it. She put the time in, she put the effort in, and she made her party be one of the top 6 parties we're now talking about today.
Like, that is a history of commitment.
Exactly, and I think it just goes to show what's possible in the Canadian political sphere, like what you can do, and you should never be discouraged to not make a statement, try, put your voice out there, because I think it can always be heard.
I 100% agree.
So I guess we go into our favorite now, right? The PPC.
Oh boy. So, Maxime Bernier. He's the leader of the People's Party of Canada, the newest big federal party of Canada. He was born in Quebec to a former politician / radio host. And then he went to high school, got a lawyer degree, and worked in law for 19 years. Then, interesting fact, Stephen Harper came to his dad and said, "Hey, I want you to run again in politics because I need you in my parliament." Maxime Bernier's dad said, "No, run my son." And that's why Maxime Bernier ran in 2005. And he won 67% of the vote in his riding. So he was extremely popular, blew out the other competition. He became an important member of the government for Stephen Harper's administration, and while he was there, he championed libertarian principles and deregulation. And then when Stephen Harper resigned, he decided to run for leadership of the Conservative Party, and he won by a very slim margin against Andrew Scheer. He won 49.05%, and Andrew Scheer got 50.95%. So, and that's the same election that Erin O'Toole came third in. So Maxime Bernier came very close to being the head of the Conservative Party. After that, he kind of became a sore loser, and he started having infighting inside the Conservative Party. He had this book he was writing that he pre-released a chapter that said the dairy unions were fake conservatives because they supported Andrew Scheer, and this was before they were about to go into an election, so the Conservative Party was kind of mad at him for that. And after so much infighting, he just threw up his hands and said, "I'm gonna leave, make my own party." And so he did the People's Party of Canada for 2019. It became right-wing populist, but his party, he was the only one to win above 6% of the vote. He won about 23% in his riding and lost to a conservative. But then outside of his riding, no candidate got above 6%, and it was pretty embarrassing for them. But now he's back, polling better than he was back then. So he's hoping to at least win a few seats, I guess.
Yeah, for my part here, the history of the PPC is going to be pretty brief. As Nick said, he lost the conservative vote. He got very angry, sore losered his way out of it, and essentially that same year decided, hey, I'm gonna go make my own party. Fuck you guys. And he founded the PPC, the People's Party of Canada. Um, Maxime Bernier has always really been known to be what you would call a loudmouth, I guess. He's always been very eccentric, I guess is how I could describe it. He's been very
Yeah.
open with his ideas and loud about his ideas. And since a lot of the conservatives weren't supporting necessarily a lot of the ideas he had, and then he lost the vote, he decided to make his own party where his ideals could be implemented and people could vote on them if they wanted them. Um, I don't really know how to accurately describe the PPC's ideals. I have a lot of angry and upsetting words to describe them, I'd say. But to try and give a non-biased take, I guess I would just hover them as they're a very right-wing political party that's ideal. Their ideals socially and economically match that of a right-wing party, like a far right-wing party. To give it a cherry on top, I guess.
I'll say they're very small government, very deregulation, and very freedom, but freedom in the system where it's like, oh, if you don't want to get vaccinated and people say you can't, they won't serve you, we'll sue that business so that they have to serve you because that's your freedom.
Yeah, and I mean, you know what? Like since we're done with the main parties here, I think we can kind of segue into our personal thoughts on each of the leaders in the parties themselves.
True.
Um,
Yeah.
And might as well we'll work bottom up because since we're already talking about PPC, we can just start right there. If you want to start.
Well, we are starting at the bottom with this party.
True.
So, I hate the PPC. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I think they're essentially a party that is trying to like close itself up, dress fancy, when if you look behind it, you just find a white nationalist. I think that they are hiding a little bit of their more. I'll explain it, I guess. Maxime Bernier says that multiculturalism has destroyed this country and it has divided us. That by pointing out our racial differences or our cultural differences, we have divided the country and we should unify under one Canadian value. And that, what is a Canadian value, you might ask? I think to him, it would probably be a white Western person, white Western man, and he doesn't care about any of the other cultures. So I think it's if they became powerful enough, I would fear for people who weren't white in this country. I'd also fear for immigrants, so they're very anti-immigrant.
I'm just gonna quickly add on that fear topic. Yeah, I mean, if we want to compare it to anything, it's Trump era. It's Trump government. It's
Exactly.
it's as far right as Trump wanted to be, but not as much as he was. But they would actually do the things that Trump talked about in his speeches and stuff. Maxime Bernier would actually do. Like ban all immigration, ban all multiculturalism, billions more to the police force. You know, like all those things that Trump like dog whistled about, Maxime Bernier would legitimately do. So
yeah, exactly. And he's kind of coveted the anti-vaxxer protests. Like he's made it into his brand that it's freedom and it's anti-mask and they're infringing on our rights. And if they ticket me, I'm gonna put every ticket on my wall. Kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, no, I think to verbatim quote Randy Hillier, who is a supporter of Maxime Bernier. He said at one of the anti-mask rallies, anti-lockdown rallies he had, I'm pretty sure verbatim or close to it, he said, "Let them ticket me because I'm gonna paint my walls with them," is what he said. So, if that's like any consolation to like who these people are and what they think, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. I completely agree with Nick. I hate them. Like that's no understatement of the word. I hate them. If you vote PPC, I do not like you based on that alone. You could be a great person in real life, but vote PPC and I don't like you. Um,
Voting is IRL.
exactly. Um, yeah, I'm gonna go as far to say that they're essentially an ethno-nationalist party. And the ethnicity being white people, of course. Um, they've never
Hmm.
really explicitly said they're gonna like kick out black people or kick out any other cultures, but they want to, as Nick said, they want to assimilate into a single culture, which that alone is just racist. Like it's just baseline. That's racism.
Yeah.
Um, to say to say you don't see culture and you don't see race, you're racist. It's just that simple. There's not a lot to describe on it. If you're one of those people who believe that, deep down you're racist. Whether it's internal or external, you're a racist person. Um,
To try and isolate down a culture to one unifying factor, I think in itself is ethno-nationalist because it's like you can't unify a population around one thing unless you start getting rid of people who don't believe that because not everyone's going to join you. So
exactly. And we'll get into polling. We're going to talk about polling like near the end, but it is a little scary how much they are actually able to poll compared to what they polled last time. It's getting a little
mhm.
interesting. And as Nick said too, he's adopted the anti-mask, anti-vax, anti-lockdown. It's literally just part of who he is. It's part of his identity now. He's not vaccinated. He said he's never going to get vaccinated. All of his supporters, for the most part, agree with him and are on board with him. Um,
Yep.
so it's like early COVID Trump again. Like it's my best comparison where Trump said, "Don't get the vaccine. You don't need it. Take other bullshit drugs." He's like the exact same way, but he's going to continue doing that for the rest of his life. Um, he won't change, at
It's
least.
sad. It's sad.
It is. It's honestly, I don't know if scary is the right word, but it's definitely sad that they're getting the polls. That again, when we talk about polling, you'll see, or you'll hear us talk about it. It's sad that they're getting the polling they're getting. It is. It makes me look at Canada definitely in a way different light, for sure.
I'm interested in like a morbid sense to see they got about 270,000 votes last election. I'm curious if they'll break a million this year,
I genuinely think it's possible, for sure.
which is insane, actually, just insane.
But not to get too much into polling yet. We'll save that. Do you want to voice thoughts on Green and Miss Paul?
Okay. The Green Party, for the most part, I like a lot of their policies. I think I think I support them. I support what they're doing, but I think that their existence as a climate change party or as a left-wing party has kind of been reduced by the fact that virtually every party now, even the conservatives, have all acknowledged climate change is real and are all putting forth plans to combat it. Only the PPC hasn't because they don't believe in it. Um, so while I do support like their policies, I don't think that they're necessarily needed to like push the voice on climate change out there now. Instead, they've had to like uh, on a lot of the other issues they're fine, but on climate change they've had to create greener and greener policies, and by that I mean like unrealistic goals of like transitioning to zero carbon electricity by 2030, right?
Yep. No.
So
I don't know.
no,
It's not just zero carbon electricity. I think it's zero. It's almost total net zero carbon emissions as well. Like it's a ridiculous goal.
right.
It's a ridiculous goal.
They've had to almost moral absolutist themselves into being the best green party so they can still have that kind of niche, which to me at this point, if you have to do that instead of just acknowledging that other parties are focusing on climate change like the NDP, which is who they align with most, and supporting that party, I think at that point you're kind of just holding on to the idea of being a party instead of the idea of fighting climate change.
And
As
I find it interesting too on that topic that it's weird. I understand the name of your party obviously defines your party, but it seems like they're taking that extra step and saying since we're the Green Party, we have to be the greenest party. There can be no other party as green as us. And it seems
yeah,
like they're becoming too focused on the green thing, which is important. Obviously, it's very important, but they're becoming way too focused on that one green aspect, and they're not putting as much time into the rest of their platform.
and I will say maybe I'm coming at this from a biased perspective because I am a big supporter of the NDP, and I do kind of see the Green Party as a detractor from NDP support. So maybe that is a little bit of my bias coming in there, but
No, yeah,
I
and I
do think
think
that's also
well,
the
we're
case.
on our opinion talk right now, so I think I can add on to what you're saying and say like we've talked about this obviously off podcast, off stream before. vote splitting is a difficult thing to get into. I think it's a slippery slope fallacy, is what I can make on it. But at the
Mhm.
same time, absolutely, the NDP and the Green relate in so many ways that if they just coalition together and maybe the Green Party makes the NDP a little bit farther into the climate and the NDP makes the Green more farther into the economy side, they would be the ultimate coalition of parties. And it's so weird that they're running smear campaigns on each other when they're essentially attracting the exact same type of voters. It's just that now the voters have to choose between those two parties. I just find it really interesting.
Watching the debate, it was essentially them agreeing a lot with each other.
Yeah, and if you just look at their, like we did on stream, if you just look at their base platforms, they're essentially the same on most issues, like most
Yeah.
other issues.
Wasn't there? Yeah, there was the almost verbatim issue. I can't remember what it was, but
I
there was
don't.
just
I
the
think it
exact
was
same.
it was on old care. I think not like
Right? Yeah.
not long
National
term homes, but
standards.
old care. Yeah, and
They're the same on so many issues.
it's so stupid. Like they literally had the verbatim, almost the exact same wording for one of their platform statements, and it just goes to show that they agree on so much that I think it's ridiculous that they're fighting each
Mhm.
other so much.
And maybe this is my personal opinion, so don't take this as like fact, but I think a lot of people view them warmly, if that makes sense. I think people have a good, like, quirky view of the Green Party, that they're there, they're pushing what they want. So I think it's hard to imagine politics without them, like going away. And I think also some people just think that it's the only climate option, that's why they vote for them. I think a lot of people just, I know Elizabeth May had a really strong following after being there for so long. And I think people just are really committed to it, that they don't want to consider other options.
Okay, well we
Is
covered
that
we
coherent?
yeah, no, it was, and I think I agree with you completely. What do you have any specific thoughts on Mrs. Paul herself, or?
Miss,
Oh, and just to
honestly,
reiterate, I mean, again, I think we kind of mentioned it by saying how much we hate the PPC. We also hate Maxime Bernier. That's our thoughts on Maxime Bernier. Like,
oh yeah,
just
we do.
yeah. But on
Annie
Paul, I
Paul,
think it's a bit different, obviously. Um,
I feel bad for her, quite honestly. Um, it seems her party's like fighting against her so much, and I don't know if it's always deserved. The reason Jenica Atwin, who's the Green Party who left for the Liberals, left them is because she said that Annie Paul's statement on the Israel-Palestine conflict, very relevant to the Green Party, wasn't strong enough.
yeah.
That Annie Paul should have called for a complete ceasefire and a reinstation of Palestinian rights, which I agree with. Um, so that's the reason she said she left, was because of that one issue, and then that started the whole scandal where they tried to oust her as party leader. And I don't know if, like, for the Green Party, that should have been a moment of chaos. So I feel bad for her because I think she could have done more if that hadn't happened.
I think I
I
hold
think she's a good
your
politician.
line of inquiry there with the feel bad for sure. Obviously, a lot of things that have happened to her weren't necessarily brought on to her by herself or by like her doing it to herself. It's just things that
Mhm.
happened, and she's in a really shitty position for it. But at the same time, I think she's a bit of a I think she panders to optics way too much. I think that's my like big criticism of her.
Right. Yeah.
Like during the debate, for example, we watched the debate together. She kept bringing up how she wants more Indigenous leadership in Parliament, which obviously I agree with. Of course, I think that's fundamentally important. But she kept bringing up specific names of Indigenous leaders that she wants to see in
Right.
Parliament, and she wants to be here at the debate making their arguments instead of her making the arguments. And one of
Like they should
the
be leaders.
leaders, Mumalak, she's the what is it, the MPP for Nunavut?
She was the MP
MP
for
for
none of
Nunavut.
it.
Yeah. She actually went on Twitter after the debate, literally after the debate finished, and she kind of just said, "Don't mention my name. Mentioning my name for the optics is not helping anything. You need to actually put forward ways to help us, not just mention my name and act like and get votes and get sympathy because you mentioned my name." And I completely agree with that. I think it's a really stupid thing to do, and I don't agree with the basis of the optics for it. I just really disagree with how much she panders to it.
Yeah, they reminded me. I remember when she tried to say Trudeau was a fake feminist because he kicked out Jody Wilson-Raybould, and kind of brought up Jody Wilson-Raybould as like she should be here. I don't know how Jody Wilson-Raybould felt of that, but it is kind of odd to bring up these specific people to
Exactly.
like prove your points
Mentioning
when
the
they exist.
specific names when those people themselves aren't even for one either a part of your party or don't really have any relation to you, I feel like it's just the optic pandering, and I don't like that at
Yeah,
all.
I agree.
So that's like my criticism on her for sure. Um,
What's next?
the block is next.
Oh boy.
If you want to head us
So
off here, yeah.
my thoughts on the block, I don't like them solely because of the one axis of Quebec sovereignty. Um, I think for this party, I think you can for sure say that they vote split, they seat split actually. They because they're such a left-leaning party, they take seats from the NDP, the Liberal, and I guess maybe like a really Quebec nationalist conservative would also vote for these people, but they they take these seats away. They take 32 seats away from the other federal parties, which are there to represent all of Canada, and say though these seats will only represent Quebec now. They won't be part of other parties. They won't be part of coalitions. They won't help support other parties. It's it's truly just a selfish party that says screw the rest of Canada. We don't care. We're gonna support Quebec. And to me, when you live in Canada, I think you should be, and you're in Parliament of Canada, I think you should be trying to help all of Canada progress towards these left-leaning policies that they do support, but they only do it for Quebec, so therefore they can't help anyone outside of Quebec, and to me that's just a waste of a party.
Yeah, and I don't
Um,
even have much to add to that. I completely agree with everything you just said. The one thing I will add, moving, unless you had more to say on the party itself.
um, Not much to say on the party itself.
I was gonna say, okay, then
Yeah, no.
moving into Blanchet specifically a little bit, he at the debate for like a direct example of what Nick was just saying of how they only care about themselves and it doesn't benefit any other Canadians. Um, he directly at the debate, whenever he was asked about a question that related to all of Canada as a whole, which were most of them, obviously, it's a federal debate. Um, he would always weasel in there. He's a little fucking weasel. He would always weasel in Quebec somehow into his answer. He would start off with like
Yeah,
his really good left-leaning answer, like I believe we should be canceling pipelines and focusing on green energy for Quebec. He would always like he would put that little fucking for Quebec, or he'd mention Quebec in some way to so you know that he doesn't give a shit about the rest of Canada. It's Quebec specifically that he cares about.
yep. They will only vote for things if it totally supports Quebec. Don't really care about the other provinces. If it can be good for them, sure, but it has to support Quebec the most.
It just pisses me off about how much of like a little weasel he was about it at the debate. And then he was getting like really upset that he wasn't getting enough time, and or that his answers were being looked down upon, and it's like there's a fucking reason. It's because everyone else here is here to represent all of Canada. You're here to represent Quebec, so they're going to look down on you a little bit. Like
And I actually have this weird little, and it's not really related to that, I guess, but it's related to what he said at the French debate, which I thought was a weird thing, where he argued for ending the CRB, the Canadian Recovery Benefit, except for the arts. But he argued that it would help businesses if the CRB was ended, and that's a weird, like, not left-leaning position in my opinion.
no, that's a very
Um,
conservative take.
yeah, but he is in favor of ending the CRB, except for the arts, which apparently still need it, but small businesses need their workers back, I guess,
Yeah, and
which they do. But
I think it's interesting too on Blanchet again about recently. This is like it's related. Recently, so during the English debate, one of the questions that was posed was I think it's about Bill C11 or something like that, or Bill 11 in Quebec. I think that's what it is. Don't quote me on that one. That essentially it's a bill that mandates that you're not allowed to wear any cultural or religious like fashion items to work or to school or to like to places of employment.
to
Um,
enforce the secularism.
yeah, so they were. The question was asked to Blanchet, like it was asked to everyone, but it was asked to start with to Blanchet. Um,
No, wait,
do you think this law is racist? Um,
and he
and
said
he
that
got really angry, obviously, about it because he believes the law is not racist by any standard. And then a lot of the other candidates kind of weaseled their way out of it and didn't really answer the question. And now there's this whole big thing where Blanchet and a bunch of Quebec members, like parliament members and like mayors and liberal riding members and all that, are telling or asking the debate council to apologize for that question, insinuate because it insinuated that Quebec was racist, and now a
Hmm.
lot of these leaders are actually saying yes, we should apologize, and I don't know, maybe this is just my biased leftist take here. I think it's fucking stupid. I think it's ridiculous. Um,
Allow people to wear hijabs.
yeah, I agree that the law is racist, and I agree that the question was not biased. I think the law is racist, and the question was, is it racist? It wasn't implying it was. It was asking, is it racist? Um, and I think it is. And I think these other leaders saying that we should apologize for that question is fucking weaselly, and I think it's stupid. But at the same time, Blanchet being like a little fucking little weasel he is, like getting like he's using it for optics. I don't think he actually cares that the question was asked. I think he realizes that he can make a big deal off of the question was asked and drum up support within Quebec, and that's exactly what he's doing.
Forgive me if I'm wrong here, but I do believe it was the question only asked to Blanchet in the lightning round at the beginning when they were like asking specific questions to the other leaders. Like they asked Enemy why they should trust her party. They asked Conservative why he split pumping and guns. They asked Justin why he called the election, and they asked Blanchet about the laws.
Oh, you may be right.
Yeah. So
Well,
the
I'm pretty sure.
yeah,
I'm pretty sure either way, some of the other leaders chimed in. Did they not? Because he started getting really
I don't.
angry.
He did. I don't remember, but he got really angry.
Yeah, but bottom line, the bottom line is still the same. He's using it as a way to promote his own party, and I think it's fucking weaselly.
Yeah. And then later on in the debate, he complained that he hadn't had as much time to talk, but that was because he cut his answers short to that question.
Yeah.
Okay, who's next?
So we're gonna go Jagmeet in the NDP now.
Doug Mead. I think the NDP is the best party. I
Yeah.
genuinely think I agree with like almost all of their views. And their healthcare plan is honestly my biggest sell on it. I love the fact that they cover dental care for people making less than 90,000,
Pharmacare for
cover
all.
mental health, pharmacare for all, free mental health services, free eye care. That stuff is needed, and I want it desperately for the future of Canadians. And that is honestly I think one of my biggest swaying points. But I also love the fact that they aren't all the way there. I do believe like there's some issues that we think they could do more for Indigenous reconciliation, but they're fully in support of it. They'd enact all the 96 calls to action. They'd end all the water boil advisories as soon as possible. And generally, I think the NDP would be the best future for this country. Maybe I'm dick sucking the NDP here, but I don't think but I think they're the best.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're definitely dick sucking, but I don't think it's a bad thing in this case, right? Because I agree with you on what you were saying completely. I completely agree with you. I agree that they should. That I know it's not going to happen. We'll get to that when we talk about the polls, but I agree that they would be the best foot forward for this country for the next 4 years, at least. And I agree that most of their platform statements I completely agree with. Actually, I'd say all of their platform statements I agree with. There's my I don't want to dick suck too hard. I do have criticisms though, and my criticism is I think being a leftist and being what I consider myself for the most part as a socialist, as far left as I am, I think they don't go far enough, and that's where I would criticize them. I think since they've become
Yeah.
the NDP, they've become more moderate in the social sense, and I think I would ask that as much as I love their platform statements and what they want to do, I would always ask that they go farther with those, and I get a little upset that they don't go as far as I want them to.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think they could do better, as always. And I do have criticism too. Just they're the best option at the moment.
Yeah, best option for sure. Just
And
I wish they committed to the left leaning uh, uh, left leaning position they hold a little bit more than they really do, because I think they do lean a little, not centrist, but they lean a little bit back towards the right, like not the right, like going onto the right side. They just lean a bit away from as far left as they are with some of
yeah,
their certain policies and stuff.
and I think we should clarify here the reason, like I said before, like the Green Party is the same as the NDP. The reason we do support the NDP over the Greens is that the NDP is a firmly established party that has more than 3 seats in the parliament.
And
Like they,
they're firmly
you
established as they define themselves, a social democratic party. And I think in today's society and today's way of governing, I think that's what I would define myself as a social democrat. But if I had the ability to
mhm,
mold and change, I would obviously move to socialism.
yeah.
So they're the closest thing.
Um,
They're the next best thing.
Evan, what do you think of Jagmeet Singh?
I I think he's great in a lot of respects, for sure. I think it's amazing that he's a visible minority representing a major party. I think that's awesome. I think it's awesome how outgoing he is. I think outgoing is the word I would use to describe him any day of the week. I think outgoing is the best adjective to describe Jagmeet. I think he seems like he's constantly filled with energy. He's constantly interacting and engaging with younger audiences, older audiences, middle-aged audiences. Obviously, as we said at the start, he's been taking a lean towards younger audiences recently. But I think no matter what, if you're at his rallies, if you're on a Twitch stream with him, if you have the ability to text him, if he's calling you because he liked your question so much, he's always engaging. He's always out there. He's always putting his best foot forward, and I think I love that aspect about him for sure.
I 100% agree. I think whenever I see like videos of him, whenever I see photos of him, he always seems to be in his best spirits. He's always there. He's always smiling, and he just seems like someone you could look up to, and
He
he
seems
would be
so
able to talk to them.
optimistic, and I love that.
Exactly. Yeah. Um, and I think he seems really personable. Like, with the call he gave to that one person who texted him, I think that was a really wholesome conversation there. And I guess to go into some criticism of him.
Wait, before we go criticism,
Okay,
I just want to add.
sorry.
Yeah, just no, it's fine. I just want to add one thing. Yeah, not only like as I mentioned, where you can text him, like he has his number available. Like, it goes through like fucking filters and shit like that. But you can text him
Yeah.
questions, and then there's a chance he may respond to you like directly, or he may even call you. As Nick was saying, he actually called a woman. Oh, or, I mean, he called someone. I don't know if she defines herself as a woman, or they define herself
She
as
does.
a woman. Okay, so she called her, and
She called her.
they actually had I think it was like a 30-minute phone call about about her question, and they went into like personal things and how her personal experiences affected the question, why she asked the question, how her personal experience affect her day and everyday life in Canada, and he sympathized. And I know that could be an act. You can always argue, politicians always sympathize, but I think he genuinely means it. I think he genuinely cares, and I think no matter how much money he makes being a politician and blah blah blah, and how much higher he technically sits than me on the economic ladder, I think
Hmm.
he gives off the impression, and he gives off the general care that he's one of us, you know, and he's fighting for the
Yeah.
people that are like us, and I think that's what's most important.
To speak on that, like I guess this is a little tangent. I don't think we're of the mind that if you're rich, that doesn't inherently make you a bad person.
No, not
How
by
you
any
got that
means.
money matters, but
Exactly,
how you
and
got the money, yeah.
I just think he's one of those people that doesn't, not maybe flaunts, not the right word, but he still sympathizes, like, because he remembers, I think he keeps it in his mind where he was one of us. He was a lower
Yeah.
income student or lower income young person, and I think he still holds that true to heart, and it lets him sympathize so easily with working class, and I fucking love that. I think that's really important.
Okay,
And
criticism time.
no, actually, I got one more.
Okay,
I'm sucking his dick a
go
little bit right now.
go ahead, go ahead.
I think he's also really good at emotions. It's a weird way to phrase that, but I think he makes I think he has really, 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 really good speeches, and especially when it comes to emotional topics. Like, I don't know if anyone's watching this or listening to this has seen when he spoke at where the Muslim family was killed in Toronto by the violent car
London.
attack. Yeah, sorry, in London by the violent car attack. He gave an insanely moving speech, and as a Muslim, or are Sikhs Muslim? Am I right there?
Do believe they are a sect under it.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure he related to being a Muslim himself. That's why I'm pretty sure I'm right to say it. And so as like a Muslim man, talking about Muslims being murdered under an act of discrimination, a violent act of discrimination, it was very moving. It was amazing to see. And he's given speeches at residential schools where the kids have been continually being found dead and buried. He's been giving amazing speeches with those Indigenous leaders there and talking to them and voicing his opinions on those things. And while you can argue those are all just emotions and he could be doing it just for the optics, I genuinely, in my heart, believe he actually cares about those things. And those speeches and the words that he says are completely real. And I just think it's really amazing to see that in someone who is running to be the prime minister of my country.
Okay, sorry. I looked it up. Sikhism is a fusion between Hinduism and Islam. It doesn't directly say that they are Muslim.
I mean, I'll look it up to make sure I'm not wrong. I'm just gonna look up as Jagmeet Muslim.
Okay, yeah. We don't want to get this wrong.
Oh no, he did. No, he does clarify. I'm not Muslim. I'm Sikh. So yeah. So no. So he's not Muslim. But I think either way, my point still stands that he gave in a very emotional speech at the London incident, and he's given many more emotional speeches at other emotional, like extremely emotional things, like with the residential schools and stuff like that. And I just think he genuinely means everything he says, and I really like to see that.
I do agree with that. I think when he's talking, you can tell that he means the things that he's saying.
Yeah,
now,
and I think that's really important.
For me to go into criticism of them, this is more, I guess, in general in recent history. I do think he can focus too much on not a negative campaign, but he has Justin Trudeau in his sights and won't back off of it. And by that, I mean he can be taken off of other topics that are being talked about and focus on Justin. For example, in the English debate, when they were talking about foreign policy, he had this really weird moment when he sort of said, like, Justin Trudeau has been failing these things, and that's why I want to talk about long-term care homes.
No, yeah,
when they were
so
talking
I'm
about
pretty
China
sure,
a second ago.
maybe not verbatim, but I'm pretty sure, it was during the foreign policy, and I think Justin was giving his answer, and then they called on Jagmeet to answer because it was an open debate question.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he essentially said, yeah, blah, 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 foreign policy, but, don't believe anything that Justin Trudeau just said because he said he was going to help long-term care homes, and he never did that. This is why I think this is what I will do for long-term care homes. It was a really weird segue. It made no sense.
Yeah, and
it was really
everyone
awkward
called out
too.
on it.
And I think on criticisms too, I'll add one, and this is my criticism of all politicians, but it applies to Jagmeet as well, obviously. I think he's a bit Weasley when it comes to certain things. When
true.
it comes to, for anyone who doesn't know, the NDP holds the provincial government in BC, and the NDP leader in BC, against the NDP platform, is in favor of pipelines, is in favor of tree clearing for those pipelines, anything to do with anything that goes into that work of oil pipelines, he's in favor of. And the NDP party specifically, the federal party specifically, states they're not in favor and they'll cancel all pipelines.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting in that because he gets questioned on that all the time, and he kind of always weasels his way out of the answer. And that is one thing that I genuinely can criticize him on, because it makes me not like that aspect by any means.
He'll say some of the protests, some of the action we've seen against protesters has been really extreme and unacceptable. I do not think that protesters should be harmed. No, and then it kind of just well, what about the pipeline?
Yeah, exactly. He kind of weasels his way out, and that's a genuine criticism, because it piss me off is not the right terminology, but I'll use it here. It genuinely pisses me off when you just answer the fucking question. Say whether you support it or not. Just give your answer so I know.
Mm-hmm. And I think he I'm trying to find the words to say this. This kind of relates back to he has Justin Trudeau in his sights, but I think it can detract from his own policy stating moments. I think he has great ideas, but when he's talking about this, sometimes he can get kind of sidetracked and said, Justin Trudeau hasn't done this, he hasn't done this, you can trust us to do this. But then he kind of misses the point of what his thing is.
Yeah,
in some cases.
I absolutely agree with that. And it's to add on to the point where you said that he always gets sidetracked by bashing on Justin Trudeau. If you just look at his Twitter, you just see it. It's like it's like
Yeah,
pretty much every third tweet, I'd say on average, will say like the Liberals and Justin Trudeau didn't do this, we will. And it's great to run because the Liberals are their biggest adversary. It's great to do stuff like that. I just think he gets too caught up in it sometimes.
I remember we talked about like a few months ago when he was like tweeting at Justin Trudeau every now and then saying, "I've called on you to end suing Indigenous children. Why haven't you done this?"
Yeah,
Like
he also brought it
it
up in
got
the
kind
debate
of
too.
yeah, and it should be stopped, but it was done in a way that was kind of like he's not listening to you, man.
Yeah, that's the thing. And yeah, and honestly, those are like I think for the most part, those are like my two. I mean, I have criticisms that apply generally to all politicians, but for the most part, those are my two like main criticisms of specifically Jagmeet. Um,
Yeah, I agree.
so if we want to move into the Conservative Party and O'Toole,
Uh, so this party is actually my favorite party. Uh,
hmm
no, generally I don't like the Conservative Party. It's kind of obvious because I am a leftist. Um, I just don't think that they'd put this country in the right direction. I think they'd be preferable to the PPC, but beyond that, no. I would prefer a liberal government over them any day of the week. Um,
and
for the most part,
I think what you said there. Sorry to cut off, but I think what you said there, just to before we get away from the point where you said that they don't put the country in the right direction. I mean, if we just look at the what is it, 13 years under Stephen Harper. I mean, there's your evidence. I think, in my opinion.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I think he did a lot of bad things. I think he moved the country in a lot of bad ways. I think he exemplified diversity in the country, like in a bad way, not in a good way. And I think he really split a lot of people on a lot of different things. And I genuinely disagree. Obviously, that's Stephen Harper. Not just the Conservatives were at fault there. It's Stephen Harper a lot as well. But he represented the Conservatives, so I tie it all together and I just say I didn't like anything that happened during that period.
Well, at the moment, the party is still the party of Stephen Harper because they haven't had a prime minister who wasn't him.
Exactly.
So, but trying to come up with concrete criticisms of them, I just generally don't like their party platforms. If I can think of what was it with the do they support the national standards for long-term care homes?
No,
No,
they
they don't.
don't.
Yeah, that was one thing. They said they wouldn't implement into legislation to like make national standards for long-term care homes. They just create like a platform and say, "Hey, provinces, please follow this," instead of just making it a law and saying, "Hey, this is how you actually have to treat long-term care homes now.
Yeah,
Make sure they're
and
not."
to add on to that as well, just like their entire platform, what we kind of covered in our stream. Sadly, we fucked up and we didn't get the VOD, but so no one can watch
Yeah.
it. Sorry for that, but we covered all the platforms in our first stream. In like fucking not in what's the word like really in depth. We did it really in depth. We went over every single policy for every single platform. And what you find more often than not in the Conservatives is that where the Liberals will throw money at an issue, the Conservatives will throw tax credits at an issue instead. And I also don't like that by any means. Um,
That's true. With climate change,
yeah, the
their
green
their
bank
solution,
account. Yeah, fucking stupid.
their
Sorry if you want to
it's just,
describe it, yeah.
um, I do believe in like vague terms. It's they'd give you a tax break for like amount of tons of carbon you produce, right? I'm right.
Yeah, and then that money that you get tax you get the tax like the what's the fucking word? You get the subsidy back
Tax
like
break.
yeah, you get the
Oh yeah,
tax
yeah.
break on. You have the option to put it into something they call a green account, which is where you put money into that account and I think it's tax free and you're allowed to put money into that account to only spend on green products. And
Yeah,
if you
it's
don't understand what's wrong with that, just by us describing it, because I think we kind of described it pretty shittily, but just think like you're getting money back to put into a specific green account that you can only spend on green products. What the fuck is a green product? Like it's so vague.
yeah.
It's so undefined that I have no idea what it genuinely means.
And here's one
And the
I
fact
can
that they're giving tax breaks and tax credits too, I just hate that in general. But
here's a criticism I can levy at Aaron O'Toole and the party
mhm.
is I don't support their stance on guns. I'm kind of I don't like guns
Yeah, we
Uh,
differ in this a little bit.
a little bit, but I think in general we both agree that like
The average
some
person
guns
should not
shouldn't
be
be.
able to own a fucking high-powered assault
Yeah,
rifle. Yeah.
yeah. So originally the conservative platform was they were going to repeal the liberals' ban on like uh firearms, and they would just create some new system instead of just saying no, you can't buy these bad guns. Um, and I thought that was bad, but then Aaron O'Toole, when he realized that like this wasn't going to win him the election, he actually reversed this, contradicting his party's platform in the middle of the election, and actually reversed this. We'll just keep it as it is. And to me, that's a flip-floppy thing where it shows that he is
He'll do whatever it
Aaron
takes to
O'Toole
get
is,
votes,
yeah,
which
wolf in
is a
sheep's
terrible
clothing,
thing.
but also just you can't pin him down, and that's not a good quality in a leader.
Yeah, and you know what? A fucking I think a criticism we can absolutely levy on the Conservative Party. We kind of mentioned it earlier, and to go into criticizing Aaron O'Toole a bit. When we say wolf in sheep's clothing, we mean, as we said earlier, I think near the start of the podcast, is that Aaron O'Toole supports LGBTQ. He says he's an ally. He supports trans rights. He supports abortion rights. He supports climate change being real. He supports
Mm-hmm.
vaccines, mandated vaccines. He supports like all of that shit. But there is a large number of the people in his party that are the exact opposite of that, and he has stated that he won't control those people. So if your riding leader or even your provincial leader is any of those like anti-mask, anti-vax, anti-lockdown, blah blah blah, any of that shit, he will not stop them from implementing their views into your area.
Yeah, I think a great way of describing it would be as if you had a friend group and one of your friends turned out to be like super pro-life and they would like try and ban all abortions, and then Aaron O'Toole friend would be like, no, I'm a pro-choice person, but I'm not going to cut out my friend because he has these views.
Yeah,
It
it's like I think even a better way to describe that is like if you had Aaron O'Toole as a friend and you had another friend and one of your friends was really fucking racist, said the N word all the time, and then Aaron O'Toole comes up to you and he's like, I'm not going to stop being friends with this guy because he's expressing his own views.
Yeah, I disagree with him,
I
but
disagree with them. I'm not racist, but I think he should have the right to express his own beliefs.
exactly.
And yeah, that's a
Um,
really good analogy, and it's what he is. He's a wolf, again, a wolf in sheep's clothing. His party doesn't support a lot of the things he says he supports. So if they get in power, I'm gonna say we're pretty fucked in a lot of ways.
like he has to work for the Canadian people, but he also has to work for his party. Because if his party doesn't like him, he will be ousted as the leader, and because he wouldn't support their social conservative views. They're a big tent, and I think he's honestly he plays a bit too far off the left of that big tent
Yeah, I think the
in the
conservatives
conservative
are
bubble to
a big
support it.
circus tent, and he's kind of like the fucking ringmaster here. You know, like
Yeah.
he's like the clown. He's like putting on the makeup and he's
Mhm.
portraying himself as someone, and then in reality he goes back and he has like the freaks, quote unquote, in cages in the back of the circus. You know, like
Yeah. Um,
he's definitely I think, to bottom line it, to not analogize it, I think he's a fake is what I should say. Like
and I can actually go a bit into depth in this. When he first ran for conservative leader, he ran like he is now, like as a moderate, as a pro-choice, pro-LGBT. And you may be wondering, how did he get the social conservative vote in the next election, considering who he is now, right?
mhm.
Because in the second leadership election, he ran as a true blue conservative, a true conservative moderate. Like he was the middle of the Conservative Party. He would essentially support like your choice on like what the provinces want to do with abortion rights and stuff like that. He didn't come out as this like pro LGBT ally during that leadership race. He played his card close to the vest, and now he's back to being a moderate as soon as the election's happening because he knows that Canadians won't like that.
And you mentioned it earlier. It's just another example of how flip floppy he is. And I personally don't want someone who's so flip floppy to be a leader
Mhm.
of my country. You know, because who's to say he gets in power and he doesn't just go back and become the moderate again? You know, like who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Um,
Uh,
liberal time.
yeah, Liberal time. This is probably gonna be the biggest one because obviously they're the most prominent party currently. I guess
Yeah.
we'll start with the Liberals themselves and then we'll go to Justin.
The Liberal Party. When I was younger, I thought they were the best.
Yeah, I thought they were
That was
gods
before I
among
was
men.
literally. I thought when I was younger, I thought, damn, especially when Justin Trudeau in 2015, he was like when Obama was running in the States.
He was
When
hot.
Obama came in
He
and he was
seemed
going to change
progressive.
everything.
He was young. You know.
hmm And then he got into power, and it took me a while to realize this, but he, with the Liberal Party, because we're talking about them right now, didn't change much. In fact, they promised pharmacare, they promised election reform, they promised all these other things, and then like they did some things that were nice, like uh, the I liked the gun ban, so they did that, which I agreed with. But then there were so many things that they left by the wayside that it felt like they didn't do anything. And then when the next election comes around, they just campaign on the same things that they could have done when they had a majority. So
Yeah.
I think the liberals campaign well.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
don't think they'll follow through on anything they say.
No, and also to go back, you didn't. I also agree with the gun, like that gun ban. We're in agreement there. You didn't have to say it in a weird voice.
Okay, sorry.
Not to, we won't get into like our we can talk about our thoughts maybe on stream one day about how we feel about the gun laws and stuff. But
Yeah.
I did agree with that ban. And I agree with what you're saying completely about the Liberal Party. I think them as a like I think when we were saying Aaron O'Toole is a wishy-washy person, I think the Liberal Party is a wishy-washy party as a whole. I think
Mhm.
they'll promise things that sound amazing and you'll love them. And for like, you know, as you were saying, I did in 2015 when I was fucking 14 years old. I was like, holy shit, this is great. Um, but they don't follow through with 90% of the things they say, and that's where the problem lies.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
they they campaigned like the fucking example I bring up continually is they campaigned as a they campaigned with in 2019, I believe it was, with wanting to not give Jesus Christ, subsidies to oil and fuel companies anymore, and then the next year
hmm
they gave them 900 million. So it's one of those things where they can say the best things and say the most amazing things, but how often do I really find they follow up on any of them? Not often at all.
Exactly. I think a good example is why did it leave my brain as soon as I was gonna say it? um
Well, if you want me to say something while you're thinking there.
yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say one reason why I know it seems like we are shitting on them hard. I don't like the Liberal Party by any means. I probably dislike them almost as much as I dislike the Conservative Party in a lot of respects. It's just at least with the when we say that we'd rather the Liberals win the minority compared to the Conservatives, even though they're essentially the same fucking party on so many respects, at least I know that in the hands of a Liberal, nothing may get done for the country, which is fucking awful, but at least I know Liberals through and through support abortion rights, support trans people, support LGBTQ people, support climate
Yeah,
change, like not support climate change, but support believe in climate change, and
they're
believe in
pro climate change.
support vax mandates, support lockdowns and mask measures. At least I know through and through they support all of that. Whereas
Mhm.
in conservatives, there's a chance that there's a large majority that don't. So as much as I dislike
Exactly.
them, at least they have
With
something going for them, you know?
with a liberal government, abortion rights would never be in jeopardy.
Exactly. And I think that's a big deal.
It is like legitimately liberal vote. I think is a vote almost for the status quo
Yeah,
in a
exactly.
way.
Exactly.
The
Well,
conservative thing I think is a regress, and I'm hoping that we just switch more to NDP as we grow as a country.
and if there's anyone who doesn't understand what we kind of mean by the status quo in that sense, think about it like I'm sure most people, Canadian or anywhere else, have heard, obviously know about the United States elections in some, like they're huge. In some way, they know about them.
Mhm.
I'm sure a lot of you guys realize or know that people who supported Bernie ended up voting for Joe Biden, like Democratic wise, because it was a vote for the lesser of an evil, and I think that's what the liberals are in our sense. It's a lesser evil.
Yes, 100%. Then, and that's really what they are.
They're not
It's
great.
not.
They're not great or even good, in my opinion, by any means. But they're better than the conservatives, so I'd rather have them.
Mhm. Yeah, and we try to be honest with ourselves about that. I think we don't try and like be purists. I guess we can
No,
understand that the liberals aren't gonna like destroy the country, unlike the People's Party or something.
no, for sure. I don't think they're going to destroy it. I just don't think they're going to better it by any means. At the
Yeah,
same time,
which isn't good
no, for
for
sure.
sure.
Did you think of what
Speaking
you were going to
of
say, or
Oh yeah. So the liberals campaign as progressive, but just a prime example of this is just that to donate blood, if you're a gay man, you can't donate blood if you've had sex with your partner in like the past few months, and there's just really no reason for it. And they said they would like take that away in 2019, and they still haven't.
Same with
So
conversion therapy
another
laws, right?
that pisses me off so much. Don't even get me started. They didn't ban conversion
Yeah,
therapy.
to not go too in depth into it, we'll save that topic for another time. It's a completely different topic, but it's another thing they promised in their 2019 campaign that they were going to get rid of. There's laws in Canada that still states you can participate in conversion therapy, which is where you
Mhm.
sit down and you're essentially told that being gay is not okay and being straight is better. Essentially, like that's what it boils down to. And that is
Yes,
still legal in Canada to do, even though they said in 2019 they were going to ban that. It has still not been banned.
yes. It is legal federally. Some provinces have outlawed it,
Yeah,
thankfully, but it should be illegal federally.
and it's such an easy
So,
thing to pass because if the conservatives are trying to be so progressive, then they would absolutely, it would be a bipartisan bill. Like it'd be so easy.
and again, about the conservatives, this is the thing. They held it up. There was a bill that was made it to the Senate, but then the liberals called the election, and that's why I'm pissed because they killed it. But the conservatives, half of them opposed it, and that's why it took so long to get this passed. So,
Yeah, so just another reason to shit on conservatives. But yeah, if we want
yeah.
to move into Trudeau now, or
Oh yeah. Um, the
do you
man
mind
has a
if
lot of
I
scandals.
open it a little bit here?
Me or you?
Do you mind if I do?
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, I think I'm gonna go back to the earlier point we were making when we were talking about the liberals in general. When I first saw Justin Trudeau in 2015, like that's probably one of the first times I actually really saw him because it was on the news. I was 14 at the time. I
Yeah.
wasn't really caring about politics. Um, I saw him and I went, "This is a good-looking, young individual. He seems to understand the plights of my teenager, like my fellow teenagers. He seems to understand where the country needs to go. He seems to have it all figured out." Um, and that was like my initial, probably for the first couple of years of who he was, because I didn't really care about politics at the time, so I didn't really know what he was doing or what he wasn't doing. Um, and then now, obviously, my opinion has completely changed. Not to say that maybe he's not, I think he's still a decent looking man, but like maybe that one hasn't changed as much. But again, I think he's the same in O'Toole. He's very wishy-washy. I think that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah,
If you wanna add on to that,
I agree. Like, again, in 2015, when I saw him, I remember a speech. Just I have the speech burned into my memory of him saying why young people should get out and vote. It's because like we need the young people to help determine the fate of this country, and the young people are going to lead us, and we are going to be there for them. We want to help, and it was just it spoke to me on like a level that I didn't. Again, I didn't care about politics, but I loved what this guy was saying because he seemed progressive. He seemed care about the issues of the time, and I probably would have voted him if I could have voted then.
exactly, yeah.
Um, but then as I've become more conscious about politics and what he's done, I've come to realize that he's not as good as he makes himself out to be.
Not by any means,
He's
no.
very good at speeches and he knows what sounds good because everyone loves that, but he doesn't seem to follow through on it. And I think a big critique of him that really shows that once he came into power, a lot of politicians have scandals. I think Stephen Harper had a lot, but Justin Trudeau has also had a lot of scandals, ethics scandals, where
Blackface.
oh yeah, the blackface. He did blackface, and that didn't really seem to affect his election performance a lot.
He had
But
the We scandal, the We charity scandal,
the We Charity scandal,
the
SNC Lavalin,
yeah, SNC Lavalin and Jody Wilson-Raybould, like that whole thing.
yep,
And
um,
like though like I can't list them all. I'm sure there's more, but those two alone, the We one and the SNC Lavalin with Jody Wilson-Raybould, those are like don't undermine those. Like, even though we're not listing a lot off, those are fucking massive. Those were huge
yeah,
scandals. Those like those changed the way a lot of people looked at the government for like months at a time. Um,
exactly. It was undermining, honestly,
yeah,
of like faith in government. And to go into like the We Charity scandal just a bit, it was kind of like there was this company called We that would give out like grants and like help support schools, right?
yeah,
And they gained preferential treatment because they were friends of Trudeau and his finance minister. At
which
least
should
that's what
never be
alleged, and it
allowed.
was found that the finance minister
Yeah, he had to
broke
resign.
ethics
He had to
standards.
resign.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Um,
if you resign, and the scandal isn't real, why'd you resign? Like that's pretty much the
yeah.
basis of it. Like,
And like the ethics commission found that Justin Trudeau was not at fault, but even if that's true, the scandal still happened under his watch, and he
under
should
his
have been there to
government,
stop that. Yeah.
completely under his watch,
So
completely under his government, and completely under one of the people that he called a friend. You know, like called a close friend.
yeah, yeah,
So
exactly. And all politicians have scandals, but these are just really extreme, and it
yeah,
shows a corrupt
and what, I'm not
government
saying
that I
that
don't
lightly.
like.
When I say that, like people looked at the government, especially after the Wii one, when I say people looked at the government differently for like months after, like that's no understatement at all.
Hmm.
It remained a big deal and in news and in media circulation for like 6 months.
And this is kind of a thing about Justin Trudeau, though, is that some of these scandals just kind of seem to fall off him. Like,
Yeah, it's like a
I don't
duck's
think
back.
anyone's exactly. I don't think really at the debate. I don't know if the We Charity scandal was mentioned.
Well, Jody Wilson-Raybould
But
was mentioned, but Wii scandal wasn't mentioned.
right, right, and that's like it wasn't a big talking point. No one really hit him with it, and that's kind of crazy because these things happen.
And not long ago. It's not like this happened 10 years ago or anything. This happened, what? The Wii scandal was 2019? 2020? 2019?
2020, like summer.
Yeah.
Um,
Literally a year and a half ago. Like.
literally, and it's still the same guy, guys. But beyond that, the criticism of the scandals, I also think that he is,
Wish-washy, like that's what I would say.
yeah, wish-washy. He'll say one thing and then he'll have all the right words, and then his actions in government don't really reflect that.
Yeah,
And then,
he'll preach to the masses about how progressive he is and how amazing he is, and like not amazing in the narcissistic sense, but amazing like how amazing his party is, and then his
Mhm.
party will go do the exact opposite of what he just said, or won't do what
Yeah,
he said at all. So,
exactly. Um,
but I think you're
yeah, I
right.
don't
I
think
think a genuine, not a criticism, but a genuine like what's the opposite of criticism? I can't think of the word.
compliment.
Compliment. What a genuine compliment is, though. I do think he is very good at speeches, and I think he's very good at with his words for the most part.
Hmm. Oh, 100%. And he's very good looking.
True. Like, and I think that helps appeal to people in a general sense, right?
It does. Now, I do. This isn't really related. I do hate the people who are like, oh, all Justin Trudeau supporters are just there for his hot looks. So
Bro,
I have
but
seen that.
I'm not gonna go conspiracy theory with it. But in 2015, I know a lot of people. It may not have been the only reason they voted Liberal, but I know a lot of people were like, "Damn, he's fucking hot. I'm voting this guy." Like,
But also marijuana, he legalized it.
true. That was really big. That was one thing he actually followed through on. I mean, that's why he won. I mean, like that's like the reason. Like that was his main platform
Hmm.
for the
It
election.
was definitely huge on it. I mean, and that was like a dividing point between him and Stephen Harper. Stephen Harper was like pro getting tougher on it,
Yeah,
while
well,
Justin was
Stephen Harper was
legalizing it.
pro war on drugs, and Justin Trudeau is still
Yeah,
pro war on drugs, just not war on weed, I guess.
yeah. Um, so charity scandals,
Yeah, do you have anything else to
good
add,
looking.
criticism-wise, or?
I don't think so, no.
No, okay, then if not, I feel like we covered these pretty well. Obviously, if anyone listens or watches this and wants to ask anything further or like for clarification, obviously don't be ever afraid to do so. If we
Do
want
you want to go over the polls, or?
yeah, I'm kind of down to just segue into the polls real quick and go over them.
Okay, yeah, let's do a quick poll.
So as of today, September 16th, Thursday, September 16th, 2021, the Liberals currently hold a 31.7% of the votes, up 0.1. Conservatives hold 31.2% of the votes, down 0.1. New Democrats hold 20.1% of the votes, up 0.3. The Bloc Québécois holds 6.4%, and they're down 0.2. People's Party, this is what we were talking about earlier, holds 6.2% of the votes, up 0.1. They're almost caught up to the Québécois. We'll get into that in a second. And then the Green Party holds 3.3%, and they're down 0.2. So if we want to just quickly cover our initial thoughts on what the standings are today, if you want to start.
Yeah. The Liberals and the Conservatives have been tied for like, I think the last half of this campaign. In the beginning, the Justin Trudeau was like slated to win by like 90% chance. But then I think people really got pissed at him for calling the election, and so now we're kind of in a balancing act of people being like pissed at him, but also like, well, I don't want the Conservatives. So there's like a weird fluctuation happening there where there's almost tied.
Yeah.
Uh, the NDP, they're doing better, and I think there's been a little bit of rising support over time. Now, you may wonder, listener, that hey, none of these people were like slated to win a majority of seats in the popular vote. But this is how fucked up our situation is that we'll get to a bit later.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting. Something that why we were talking about why the PPC voting is actually so fucking. We weren't saying scary, sad is what we were using. Why it's so
Yeah,
sad. Um, about 2 weeks ago, I'd say roughly, if you check these polls, the PPC was not even on here. They didn't even have. They had less than 1%. Like wasn't even on here in any way
it,
whatsoever. And now
it
they're
was
now
considered
they're
so.
now they're polling to possibly be in fourth place, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, they were considered so irrelevant that they were just included in other, and now they're polling, yeah, above the Greens, which
Yeah, I
is
didn't mention that other, which includes all of the what are the parties called when they're not one of the mains?
the fringe
Fringe
parties.
parties. Yeah, the fringe parties. They hold 1.1%. They're down 0.1. Obviously, that doesn't really matter, but I mean, we'll mention
No,
it. We'll mention it just for it to be mentioned.
we're
Um,
honest.
yeah, I just think it's ridiculous. Like I don't even know how else to describe it. They weren't even a party essentially 2 weeks ago, and now they're polling to be fourth, which is fucking terrifying. And it really
I
makes me
agree.
look at Canadians in a new light. I think like I don't have the fucking disillusion that we're all happy, ride polar bear to work, everyone loves each other, we're so nice. Obviously, I don't have that
You don't?
disillusion by any mean, but I never thought we'd be at the point where a fucking super far right racist white nationalist party is polling to be fourth in our country.
Me neither.
It's
I
disgusting.
like
Like
the
it's
ones
honestly
just the.
disgusting.
Yeah, it is. It's sad. I think the pandemic has helped it a lot, honestly. I think a lot of these people would have just voted conservative, but because they realize the conservatives aren't like as ultra right as them, they've all like coalesced around this one People's Party, and it's really showing off like unmasked people,
Well, yeah, I
literally.
think it's also showing. I think you're right with the COVID example because I think it's showing that since the conservatives support masks and vax mandates and the PPC doesn't, you're just seeing who the unvaxxed people are essentially. Like that's essentially what
Yeah,
it is.
yeah,
Um, and to get into, we'll go. I'll go by the top two parties for provincial. We'll say so we don't take too much time. Um,
yeah.
so we'll start with BC. So right now in BC, the cons are leading the NDP by 30.2 to 30.1. So it is a very, very close race.
And
Um,
that race has
in
been tightening.
in BC, it's been tightening over the past couple weeks. It was nowhere near this close a couple weeks ago. It is now obviously by a zero point 0.1 margin difference, which is insane. That's very, very fucking close. I think it's going to be up to these next. I think there'll be probably. I'll probably check the polls like maybe a day before the election actually happens. I mean, I check
Yeah,
every day, but like for like actual accuracy, I'll probably check a day before the election happens and see where it's riding then. I hope the NDP gets that pull through. I hope they get up by point 0.2. That'd be amazing.
and just say here like this, if they poll above in British Columbia, that doesn't automatically mean they're going to win every seat. It's just
No,
that like
higher. It's just
everyone,
hopefully higher odds is what I'm hoping
yeah,
for.
exactly.
And then to go into Alberta. So Alberta, the cons are leading by a whopping 49.9%, with
Holy
NDP
shit.
polling in second at 20.9%. So it's very clear who's going to win a majority in Alberta. Like
Yeah,
there's no way that's
huge,
suddenly going to change.
huge gap there.
If you want to do the
Unless
oh sorry yeah
I'm curious though, because Alberta just announced like the ultra like health measures for COVID. I'm curious if the PPC is going to have a bit of a surge there, just with anti-vaxxers getting really, really pissed off.
well, even if they do, I'm picturing that'll probably only bring them up by a couple percent. So I don't even think it makes that big of a difference.
Fair enough. They're not going to go down 20%.
No, there's no chance. So the next on this polling site we use anyways, I mean in most of them actually for that matter, because Manitoba and Saskatchewan have such small seat ridings because there's such small populations. They're just classified as the prairies, so it's Manitoba and Saskatchewan together, and they make up 28 seats total, like between the two of them.
Hmm.
And currently the cons there are polling in at 41.8, and NDP again in second at 24.1. Any thoughts
So
on
again,
any thoughts on that one?
that kind of rural area, the conservatives winning again. Rural areas tend to usually just lean conservative, also because these prairies are and the Alberta are like oil centric, right?
Well, Alberta's oil centric. Saskatchewan, Manitoba, I would argue, are more farming and a bit of fracking centric.
Okay, agrarian.
Yeah.
So that these are like the bases of conservative support generally, and usually I think the conservatives, the NDP and Liberals are coming from like the cities and like more urban ridings.
Yeah, I was going to make a point on that.
Um,
I think it's really interesting that you have in the prairies in Alberta, you have the cons leading, of course, but they're a right-wing party, and I would argue I wouldn't even call them center right. I'd call them a bit farther than that. And then on the other hand, in second place in both these places, you have a far left party, right? I just think it's really interesting the contrast
mhm. I
between the
think it
two.
was one of the prairie provinces was the first provincially like led government of the CCF. So there's a history of like socialist tendencies there.
Yeah, and I know Manitoba for sure is supportive. Anecdotally, I know Manitoba for sure has a lot of NTP support in its in like medium to large size towns and cities. I know for sure.
Hmm.
Um, oh, and just I didn't say this earlier, by the way. British Columbia holds 42 seats, and Alberta holds 34 seats. Just for general knowledge on
Yeah,
that.
you're about to see how lopsided Ontario is.
Yeah, so Ontario being one of the most populated, or the most populated, I guess, province, and the one of the largest provinces also, um, holds 121 seats. So it's obviously very different from then a combined total of 28 for the prairies.
Well, think
Um,
about it, 170 seats is a majority. So,
exactly, exactly. So Ontario is like one of the largest battlegrounds for sure. Right now, the Libs are polling at 37.4, the Cons coming in second at 32.4, and that's usually the case. In Ontario, you'll see it's always going to be the Libs or the Cons for the most part, and they'll always be
yeah.
generally close in polling.
Yeah, the NDP hasn't really researched here, I don't think, since like 2011 with Jack Layton. Um, I think this has kind of been a battleground. I know it got really close like last week, but it looks like the Liberals are pulling ahead again.
Yeah.
So there's a seat-rich area of like Toronto where there's like a huge swath of seats, so it's kind of leaning toward all Liberal there. So this is definitely going to be a base of Liberal support
Yeah, and I
or
mean,
toss-up.
I mean, you can
Sorry.
argue in some sense that Ontario has a lot of local ridings that have been Liberal strongholds, and has a local ridings that have a lot of Conservative strongholds as well.
Yes.
It's very split, so that's why the vote is the poll is always so close. It'll generally stay like that in any election for the most part, any recent election, anyways. Okay, so then we go into Quebec, the next largest gathering of seats, which is at 78 seats for Quebec. And here is where you'll see why we get angry at Bloc Québécois. So Liberals
Yeah.
are leading in polls at 33.2%, and then Bloc Québécois is actually coming in second at 28% exactly. And then this is where you see where we get a little upset because that's so much seat stealing that the Bloc Québécois is doing, and that's what Nick was saying earlier when he was mentioning seat stealing. Um, when Quebec has so many seats and it is such a large battleground, and you have this fucking nationalist or sovereign, yeah, no nationalist, a Quebec Nationalist Party
Sovereigntist
that
nationalists.
wants to be a sovereign nation coming in and stealing fucking, they're pulling in at 28%. They're 99% sure they're going to be the second, coming in second in Quebec. It's just shitty. It's a really shitty situation.
I agree. Um, I don't know where those voters would fall if like if the party disappeared, but generally I would assume they NDP majority, Liberal some, and then minority like Conservative, and it's just such a waste that they don't cooperate with the other parties on like coalition things and in a lot of issues. So it's so frustrating to see these seats that could go towards other parties functioning in the whole country go to these people who just don't want to work with anyone.
Yeah, it's just bottom line. It's a shit situation, and it's why we were kind of upset with Bloc when we were talking about them earlier, for sure.
Yeah.
And then to finish us off, Atlantic Canada, again, they're a bunch of small provinces. So they're put into one called Atlantic Canada, and
Mhm.
together they hold 32 seats. And currently the
Yeah,
Liberals
there's
are ruling 41.8, and Cons are in second at 29.2%. Which to
yeah,
me again is not a surprise.
this has been a liberal stronghold since basically 2015. In 2015, actually, the Liberals won every single seat in Atlantic Canada.
Yeah.
So it's a red wave there.
I,
And
I just think. Oh no, you can go. Sorry.
I'm betting that in 2019 there was like a resurgence of some like an NDP seat was won, and I think the Green seat was won here actually in Fredericton, New Brunswick. This is the only seat that has been Green, not on the East Coast. East, never, not on the West Coast.
Yeah, you got your
Uh,
directions.
pardon
I said, yeah, you got your directions right.
me. So this, in fact, in 2019, this was considered to be like a bedrock of Green support that was going to come crashing through. That is not the case in this election.
And yeah, I just want to quickly mention where the PPC is polling high. The two highest PPC polling are, coincidentally enough, in conservative strongholds, the prairies in Alberta, where they're in the prairies they're polling in at 9.3, in Alberta they're polling in at 8.4. I just think that's, you can call it coincidence. I just think it's funny how in conservative strongholds like the prairies in Alberta, PPC is polling the highest in those two places, right?
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting to look at it from that perspective, I guess.
I
Um,
definitely think.
yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, no.
Well, and I definitely think with Alberta and the prairies, maybe some people there feel like PPC. I don't think definitely don't want liberal governments, but they know in those seats, on some level, if they're as educated as like I think they are on some level, they know there's no chance of any of their seats going towards the liberals or the NDP. So there's a lot more freeing up of just voting your heart out there.
Um, so I'm going to. We'll end off the polling, I think, here. I'm going to quickly do the demographics if that's cool.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so demographics. So male versus female. Um, this is Canada wide, and this was done on September 16th. Yeah, September 16th. So for male versus female, and there's only two. Sadly, there's only two gender options, I guess, on this poll.
Yeah.
Male is coming in at 33% for the Liberal Party, 34% for the Conservative Party, 17% for the NDP, 6% for the Bloc Québécois, 3% for Green, and 5% for PPC. The females are coming in at 35% for the Liberal Party, 26% for the Conservative Party, very much lower, 25% for the NDP, way higher, 5% for the Bloc Québécois, 3% tied for the Greens, and 5% tied for the People's Party.
That's surprising to me. I thought the woman vote would be a lot lower for the PPC.
Yeah, I honestly don't think it's surprising that they're a lot lower for Conservatives, higher for NDP. That doesn't surprise me. It's pretty close, 2% difference for Liberal. That doesn't surprise me. Bloc Québécois, 1% difference. Not that surprising. Green, being exact, is actually, I don't know why it seems a little interesting to me, I guess, in some way. It's not that big of a deal. I just think it's interesting. They're both at 3%.
And I mean, you could say like we're basing this all on stereotypes of like what demographics vote, but
Yeah, I mean, we are in a sense, but I mean, it also holds true in some ways, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I'll go to age now.
Yes, please.
So 18 to 29 is the first demographic. So 18 to 29, 43% for Liberal Party, 17% for the Conservative Party, 25% for the NDP, 1% Bloc, 6% Green, 8% People's Party. And now, before I get to the other ones, I just want to make it very clear that it's very obvious that the younger audiences, like millennials to Gen Z, do not like conservatism. Like, I think it's just
Yeah,
pretty clear. 43% for liberals and 25% for the NDP, while only 17% for the Conservative Party.
or the block apparently.
Yeah, true. I just think it's. I just think. Well, I mean, I agree with that though. I think how many young people in Quebec do you really think want to be their own nation? I think it's definitely an old head take.
Yeah, I
Um,
think the dream has died down.
yeah, for sure. And I just think I'm not surprised by this at all. I mean, I'm honestly a little surprised it's that high in liberal. I was expecting maybe 30% for NDP, for like 38, 40% for liberals.
Well, if you think about it, younger people are less like invested in politics. Usually, they're the least likely to vote. So maybe it could be. I'm hypothesizing here, so you'd have to like go out and poll this, but perhaps they're like us before we started getting into politics, where they still view Justin Trudeau as like Obama kind of era.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can see that for sure. I think I just think it's like overall, it's not that surprising, genuinely.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I'll go to the next demographic of age is 30 to 44. So they're polling at 35% for the Liberals, 25% for the Conservatives, 26% for the NDP, 4% for the Bloc, and 3% for the Green, and 6% for the Peoples. Now this again, honestly, not that surprising. Still lower Conservatives. That doesn't surprise me as much. Higher
Millennials.
NDP, which is actually very interesting to me. Higher than the 18 to 29 demographic, which
I
is
don't want to throw out answers because I'm just guessing here, but I wonder if that's because they're millennials and they've experienced the like toughness of life outside of university education and just want change.
yeah. It's also not surprising to me that 30 to 44 has decent amount of people's voter at 6%. That doesn't surprise me either because when I think of 30 to 44, that's where I think of Karens and anti-mask and anti-lockdown people, like age ranges be. So not that surprising
Yeah.
to me there. So then we go to 45 to 59 as a demographic. And that's 34% liberal, 32% conservative, 18% NDP, 8% bloc, 1% green, 4% peoples. Again, I'm honestly not surprised by this one. I don't know if you are at all, but higher bloc percentage because they're the old heads who still believe in the dream, you know.
Yeah.
Lower green because they're the old heads who think climate change isn't real. Higher
And they're about to die.
conservative.
So.
Higher conservative because again they're the old heads and they've lived mostly a conservative life for the most part. So I'm not really surprised by being higher there at all. And then liberals still staying around that mid range is just that's always to be expected in my opinion.
I do think it's interesting to point out that the liberals seem to have a consistent support. Like within hasn't it all been within the 30s?
Yeah, well I was just saying my point on that just now was honestly I don't find it surprising. I find liberals sitting at a median is just a norm for me, I guess.
Okay.
I don't know. Like, do you feel different on that sense, or?
Not different. I just find it interesting that they have like essentially a strong medium for every age group. Like that isn't like they're not waving below with the youngers or getting really high with the the elderly. They're kind of just still stuck in the middle of everyone, so they're appealing to a large audience throughout the ages, which I think is a tactic. I guess
I mean, I guess it just goes to show the Liberal Party is able to expand to all ages. I guess, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so 60 and over is the final demographic, so that's 60 to however old the person may be. So Liberal Party is polling at 31 again, median.
Yep.
And this is unsurprising to me. They're polling highest for 60 and over Conservatives at 35%. 19% for the NDP, 7% for the Bloc, 4% for the Green, and 4% for the Peoples. These are all like really mid ranges for most of the parties, and I'm genuinely not surprised that 60 and over is polling highest for Conservative at all. When I think of conservatism, I think of older demographics, like older people.
And I mean, you can get into the reasoning behind that is that generally people who are elderly are wealthier because you have more money to live and like live a good life, and then generally like wealthier people, the wealthier you get, you usually turn a bit conservative. Generally, like it doesn't inherently mean it, but yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to state too, because we're honest here. So for academic honesty, this poll does have a 4% margin of error, just so everyone knows.
And a lot of our reasoning, we are not like scientists. We can't say that all the things we're saying are like true by default. So some of our reasoning behind these things are just like our opinions.
Yeah, for sure, which is to be expected. I just wanted to make it clear that this poll does have 4% margin of error. So
no, that's a good thing.
So take what I said with a 4% margin of error, which still isn't that big of a difference. Like 4% is pretty small margin of error. But for the most part, I'm trusting that this poll is pretty accurate, I would say. Now, if we want to, I feel like we covered a lot. We've been going for about 2 hours and a bit here.
Yeah, we should probably.
Yeah, if we want to just wrap up, do our outro, not our outro bit, but like our final words, I guess our final thoughts on the podcast and what we talked about today, if you want to start us.
I've really enjoyed being here with you, Evan. Been a great journey.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot. I think that was great.
I really enjoyed it. I think we were educational. one
Yeah,
thing I
and
do want to
again,
say is
I
that
encourage anyone who ends up maybe listening to this or watching this on YouTube, if you guys have questions, if you guys want to know, you guys want us to define our beliefs and what we've said, our opinions further, please don't be afraid to mention, ask, of course.
yeah.
We're always happy to clarify what we mean when we say things.
And one really important thing is if you're Canadian and you haven't voted yet, please do go out and vote.
Yes,
You know,
I don't think we can stress that enough. Whether you know you fucking we shit on you today because you say you want to go vote PPC, I still encourage you to go vote. It's your fundamental right to vote, and the higher the turnout, the better the country it becomes, right? So
yeah,
please
the more the
vote.
country, yeah. And if you think about it, like the government that gives them power still recognizes that, hey, this demographic voted for this. We want to appeal to everyone. We'll consider that.
Yeah, the only way to enact change in our democracy is through this. Well, like not the only way, but one of the main ways to enact change through the democracy is by using your voice and using your vote. And I absolutely think it is your absolute right to vote, and you should go vote.
Yes.
All right, so this was the first episode of Getting Political with us, the other half. Again, I'm Evan.
Thank you. I'm Nick.
It's been a pleasure. We're hoping to do one of these a week is our hope, so stay tuned if you guys like this one. And again, if you have any suggestions for us to talk about things, please feel free. Comments or anything like that, concerns.
Please let us be React Andes.
Yeah, feel free to let us know. Of course, we're also streaming on Twitch. We're hoping to do that every couple of days. Twitch.tv/the other half. The other half has 2 E's because we couldn't get the initial one because we suck. We actually, if you go to our Twitter or our Twitch or any of our socials, we have a Linktree link that links you to all of our socials. Our Twitter is the other half, but it's 2 E's, 2 R's because again we suck and we couldn't get the original. But yeah, thanks for everyone for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the first episode. We'll hopefully see you guys next week.
See ya. Bye.